Hello and welcome back to Karma Stories. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have a 3-hour compilation of Malicious Compliance stories for you. This is a whole bunch of previous episodes from the channel that we've put together in one place so that you don't need to change your episode and can go about what you're doing over the course of your day. Whether you're working or driving or just doing things around your house, this is 3 hours of malicious compliance to help you get through your day. Alright, on to the stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Illuminatus Prime. Deck them halls and do it right. I had moved in the previous summer, late July, into a non-HOA community and didn't have any problems with the neighbors until the day after Halloween, when someone left a snarky note on my door about not having any holiday decorations up. And if I couldn't even afford a lousy pumpkin on the porch, I was probably too poor to afford living there. Thanksgiving came and went, and I got another nasty little note saying I had better start showing some community spirit or else. Neither note was signed, and the cops just took my statement and said there was nothing they could do. That was my cue for enacting some malicious compliance. I went out and bought some lights and garlands and started putting them up when the neighbors started putting up theirs. Every couple days I'd add a few more until the front of the house was practically covered in glitz and glitter. On Christmas Eve, I added one last piece, switched on all the lights and left them running until morning. Christmas morning found me waking to the sound of an angry voice and someone pounding on my door. I cracked open the inner door and left the security door locked. Dude objected to my Christmas star having 6 points instead of 5. He launched into a racist, hate-filled tirade against me and anyone displaying a 6-pointed star. Right about then, a cop car pulls up to the curb and 2 uniforms quietly walk up while the idiot continued to rant, with many expletives, racist slurs, and some very violent threats. He must have seen I was smiling at something over his shoulder because he turned around and stopped in mid-rant. There's gotta be fallout, of course. The neighbor was last seen sitting in the back of a patrol car as it pulled away. Yeah, I went downtown and signed the complaint. Later, sat in on the hearing and had to admit under oath that a 6-pointed star is a legitimate symbol for the season. Dude got a fine and community service. I got to put up the same decorations without hassle for 2 more years before moving out of state. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Dripping Snarkasm. It says, if I had been your neighbor, I'd have put up a 7-pointed star in solidarity, maybe even a 13-point star, and a pentagram. I'd say OP took it pretty easy on the neighbors, putting up some garland, putting up some sparkly stuff, and putting up some lights. Yeah, you could have done more. You could have had Santa Claus out there on the front lawn, giving the middle finger to the neighborhood or something like that. OP, it's too bad you moved out of that neighborhood because I would have carried that on for every single holiday throughout the year with something that would give them the middle finger. Now, this next story actually appears in the comments of the first one and comes from a user named Jillycat. It says, I have this habit of checking dates for the winter holidays. I'm sure I missed some, but go for the big ones I know of. While things like Christmas and Yule are set, Hanukkah and Kwanzaa's date ranges change, so I make sure to check every year. I even started throwing in Festivus from Seinfeld because my dad liked the show. December 23rd if anyone is interested. I started looking at these dates because of all the war on Christmas, it's not happy holidays people who just annoy me. Multiple holidays and all, if I can't acknowledge them all in one getting in, I'm going to be pedantic about it. For the record though, my family celebrates Christmas, and as a pagan, I acknowledge Yule. But since my family celebrates Christmas, I celebrate and acknowledge it with them. It just bothers me that nobody bothers to acknowledge the other holidays, unless they're within that religion. If I know someone celebrates a certain holiday, I always try to wish them appropriately, as I wish anyone would do for me with Yule, which started my mental calendar. Anyway, I was at Walmart years ago in line behind a crazy lady waiting to check out. The cashier finished ringing up Crazy Lady and said Happy Holidays, and the lady went nuts, screaming at this poor cashier that it was Merry Christmas, not Happy Holidays, and the war on Christmas and so on. She had cashed out already, had her bags, and was just standing there ranting. Poor cashier looked ready to cry. I went ahead and stepped up and had the cashier start ringing my items, which set off the nutbag further, because now she was being ignored. "Can you not hear me? I'm talking to you. Say it right." Something to that effect. Like, "Lady, the people in the parking lot can hear you." I looked at the cashier to try to convey with my eyes that I would totally back her up if she decided to beat the woman half to death with the barcode scanner. And my eye caught the Star of David she was wearing. It happened to be the second day of Hanukkah. I didn't have much, so she had finished ringing me up, and I could tell she didn't want to go through the happy holiday spiel with the lunatic still watching, so I just smiled at the cashier and said, "Thank you, ma'am. Happy Hanukkah." Psycho lady lost it at me. Why would I say that? It's Christmas, not Hanukkah, blah blah blah. I just waited for her to take a breath and did, "Look lady, today is a date I don't quite remember. Hanukkah runs from this date to this date this year. This woman is wearing a Star of David, which means it's likely her holiday of religion is Hanukkah. Today is not December 25th, so no, it's not Christmas. It is, however, the second day of Hanukkah. I would like to wish you a happy Hanukkah as well from this date to this date, and on December 21st, I would like you to have a blessed Yule. On the 23rd, may you have a wonderful Festivus. From this date to this date, I hope you have a joyous Kwanzaa. Other days, may you have a wonderful holiday season. But lady, on December 25th, I really hope you have a crappy Christmas. You deserve it." It was probably one of the moments I felt proudest of myself. I got followed out of the store by screaming crazy lady, but at least she left that poor cashier alone. At least for the time she was following me. I hope she left after following me to my car at least and didn't go back. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Murgatroyd314. It says, "Another nice pedantic approach is to use Merry Christmas from December 25th through January 5th. In the 4 weeks leading up to the 25th, wish them a sober and penitent Advent." Okay, you know OP of this story absolutely made that cashier's day, possibly that cashier's week, or maybe even that cashier's whole year. I bet they tell the story about this customer standing up for them against the angry Karen all the time. This story comes to us from Bell's Games. "New manager forces me to take lunches, so I do." So the place I work at had mandatory lunch hours we're supposed to take between certain hours based on what hours we're working. I'm an operator, so it's not like I can just walk away from the job if something's going on. My duty is to keep the plant running and make sure nothing bad is happening to the equipment. So, after constantly having to call the old manager about missing my clock-ins or clock-outs because I got busy with something, he told me about this survey I could fill out whenever this happened that basically said, I took my lunch, I just didn't clock out for it, and payroll would adjust it accordingly. So, on that note, if you're on an official clocked out lunch as an operator, and an alarm goes off or you're interrupted for any reason, you have to clock back in and address the issue, and then either clock out again and retake your entire lunch, or just call a manager and fill out the survey, and you're basically paid for your lunch. So, I filled out the survey every single morning, choosing to just skip the whole ordeal of trying to remember my lunches. That's literally what the survey is for. Now, on to the malicious compliance. New manager comes in. A month in, he pulls me aside and says, I haven't been clocking out for lunches. I inform him of the survey. He tells me that's only for the occasional missed lunch. I disagree with him. The writing clearly states I voluntarily chose to skip my meal. He basically orders me to start clocking out for lunch. Sneaky malicious compliance ensues. So for the next 2 weeks, since I have a 2-hour window to take a half-hour lunch, I waited until about the last half hour, and then specifically wait until I see a certain piece of equipment drawing close to a nuisance alarm level, and then clock out for lunch. Somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes later, the alarm goes off. Oops, guess I have to clock back in and go silence that alarm. Oh no, not enough time to restart my lunch. I did that for 2 weeks straight, forcing the company to pay me for my half-hour interrupted lunches. New manager tried to ignore it until his boss, who was like old manager but got promoted a few years back, comes down to ask me why I stopped filling out the survey. I inform him of new manager's instructions, to which he rolls his eyes and tells me to go back to using the survey. Never heard another word about it. And the cherry on top, we just got all new time clocks a few weeks ago. The survey lingo pops up when we clock out now, instead of just a name and a time. So I still don't have to clock out for lunch. Now I just click OK, agreeing that I took my lunch at some point, and I'm good to go. OP added an edit down at the bottom to clarify some things. It says edit. Alright, let me add some stuff because y'all seem to think I'm giving the company free money. First of all, I'll be honest, a lot of my job is sitting around doing nothing. The plant runs itself for the most part. I'm paid to react to upsets, not sit here and do a task non-stop for 8 hours. So, in my opinion, a lot of my time is a break. Second of all, this is a union job. Third of all, I am taking my lunch. I'm just choosing not to clock out for it. My hours remain the same, whether I clock out for it or not. The survey just ensures I don't get paid extra for a missed lunch. If I do legitimately miss my lunch because of an upset, the survey also has the option to say, I missed my lunch, and I'll get paid an extra half hour for the day. The new time clocks have the survey embedded in them when we clock out, defaulted to I took my lunch. If I missed my lunch that day, I can change the clock out checkboxes to I missed my lunch, and I'll automatically get paid for them. So basically, no, I'm not working for free. I still take my lunch and probably take a bit longer than half an hour to cook everything and eat it. But I'm still actively monitoring the system. So what I'm getting out of this one is that OP isn't actually taking any time to step away from the job. They're taking their lunch, they say, but they're still actively monitoring the systems. Okay. I honestly think it's pretty important for your mental health to step away from work when they give you a break and have that time to just refresh your brain, talk to some coworkers and enjoy your time before you go back to work and focus on that completely. Besides, where I am in Ontario, Canada, you have a 30-minute unpaid lunch break, and so if I'm not getting paid for those 30 minutes, you're darn well sure that I won't be working for those 30 minutes. This story comes to us from Clinton Umbarger. Rules are important. I recently started working in a very large packaging facility. Beginning there, I was excited for the opportunities I would have working for such a major company. Early on, I noticed a lot of placating, patronizing things that sent a message of, you should be grateful you work here. It was overly obnoxious implementation too. Keeping my rosy colored glasses on, I am working as hard as I can despite everyday equipment not working correctly, conveyor belts not running, etc. Now, there are a lot of rules for our safety and the company's. One of the major rules is that if you are not officially trained for it, do not do it, even if a manager tells you to. Recently, they have become draconian with their rules, at least for the lower rung workers, not so much for management if it inconvenienced them. So you're getting coached frequently. Now, there's a manager that should not have any leadership position whatsoever. He has zero interpersonal communication skills. Anytime he has to talk to you, he is demeaning, condescending, and his voice and body language let you know how inconvenienced he is, and can't believe he has to do it. Yesterday, I had enough. Cue malicious compliance. I'm packing items into boxes and putting them on the conveyor belt. I run out of a few sizes of boxes. So, per protocol, I turn on the help light above my station and wait because I need those boxes. Manager comes by. What's up? I need these boxes. Well, do you know where they are? Or you can go get them from another station. I was told not to do that. What do you mean? You can't go get boxes? Okay, I'm asking, go get boxes. I'm not supposed to leave my station. And that is this person's job that I'm not trained for. Fine. The look on his face was blank but turning slightly red, and I thought I could see steaming rage coming out of his ears. In a few minutes, I get my boxes, delivered by manager, and continue work. Shortly after, I see him showing around the person responsible for stocking our boxes. Not much time passes, and the conveyor belt stops running, and it fills up so we can't place packages on them. Before today, I would stack them around my station and keep working and find a manager to find a solution. Our work area is not supposed to be cluttered, and I'm not supposed to leave my station. So I turn the light on and stop working. Hey, what's going on? I have no place to set my packages. What do you mean? Put them right here. Points at the floor next to my station. I was told not to put anything on the floor. It's a tripping hazard. I can't believe who told you that. When I worked at this location, stammer. I had 3 trainers on separate occasions and situations tell me this. Manager stares at me for a solid 3 seconds and looks around. That station over there. Walk over and stack the packet there. I'll put them on the conveyor belt when I get back. The station is about 50 feet away, and I'm on the end nearest it, so I start jamming out walking packages over. I hear him telling the rest of the station to do the same. In the 15 minutes it takes for the bell to run again, there is at least 75 packages piled up at the other station, all various sizes and weights. Manager walks by and stops dramatically, staring at the dragon's horde before him, mouth open, incredulous. The first package he picks up must have been heavy, cause he stumbles a little picking it up. The only place to put them on the line is right next to me. He proceeds to slam each and every one down on the belt, huffing and puffing. I don't even acknowledge his existence, but inside, I'm laughing my butt off. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called ThinGround5185. It says, is this a union job? Cause they can get very riled up by non-union managers taking union work from the floor employees, like loading the box packages back onto the conveyor. I know it was more fun watching him struggle and pitch a fit, but it could have been very satisfying after all that to tell him, you're not allowed to do that. Yeah, you could push that one a little bit further, look at this guy and say, hey, you're having trouble with those boxes. Have you been trained properly on how to move heavy objects? Cause it doesn't seem like it, and we're not supposed to do the jobs that we're not trained to do, remember? This story comes to us from Bard24601, Phony Business. Background, I was on a family phone plan with my folks well into my adult years. My dad liked to take the lion's share of the data plan and would send out a passive-aggressive, oink oink goes the pig, if anyone but him was using too much data. The rest of us had to connect to Wi-Fi whenever possible. We all had better have a good reason if we got close to using up a quarter of the shared data plan. 4 people on the plan and split 4 ways, but he liked to take his half out of the middle. The 4 of us paid into the plan each month, and in theory, it was cheaper than an individual plan. Story, for a birthday, he announced that I was getting kicked off the family plan because I needed to be a man or some other grown-up nonsense. I think he may have mentioned something about how he hated that my grown relatives were doing something similar and needed to grow up. The details are fuzzy, but this wasn't the first time, nor the last time, that he would announce unpleasant things at birthdays and holiday family gatherings. So I took it in stride and switched to an independent phone plan. I got the cheapest, most basic data plan, and it ended up being comparable to what I was paying into the family plan. I also realized just how little I actually use my data, and the plan was actually fairly comfortable for my needs, so I stuck with it. The fallout. A year later, he brings up the idea of getting me back into the family plan because getting me off the plan ended up not only costing more money per person, the phone carrier also had a deal going on where the more people connected to one plan, the less expensive per person the overall plan would be. Some sort of wholesale or group discount or another. I told him that I was perfectly happy with my independent phone plan paying my own rate. I also reminded him that the only reason why I got off it to begin with was because he didn't think I was being a responsible grown adult. I simply wanted to prove to him that I could manage all of my own bills like a real adult, unlike others in my family he liked to complain about. He tried asking me a few more times about it throughout the months because it would be so much cheaper for him, but I continually brought up how much he hated my relatives that refused to grow up and that he wanted me to not be like them per his gift on my birthday. I stuck with it because while I could have access to more data that I could use, the absence of snarky text about being a data hog was more than worth the price. OP, I think opportunity was missed here. I would be telling the other people on this family plan that they could go out and get their own independent plan as well and still have enough data to get them through. And then Dad would be stuck paying for the whole bill himself, and all that data that he's using would require a pretty hefty package, don't you think? This story comes to us from Excellent Singer 8881. School wants consistent uniform? Okay. I went to an all-girls high school, grades 7 to 12, with a mostly lax uniform policy. By this, I mean there was a regulated uniform, but you could accessorize, dye your hair, and wear whatever socks, which was more than what most schools in the area allowed. We made up for this with excellent test scores and good behavior. Well, going into my senior year, year 11, the principal changed, and we got stuck with this no-fun, absolute micromanager of a principal who kept trying to switch things up in our, let's be honest, pretty good school. Even the teachers hated her. As an all-girls school, most people wore the skirt and dress, but we always had an option for pants in winter, which most people took advantage of as it got super cold. In senior years, the uniform changes from junior years, so 7 to 10 wear a red and blue tartan dress in summer, and then a tartan pinafore or blue pants plus shirt plus tie in winter. Then, in senior years, it's all year round a blue skirt and short sleeve senior shirt or tartan pants. The senior skirt and shirt combo was cute, and most people wore it correctly during summer. But during winter, most of us would freeze because most people don't want to wear the ugly tartan pants, and wearing tights underneath was ugly too. The old principal let seniors wear blue pants instead, simply because she was nice and could see we were struggling. But when the new principal came in, she immediately stopped this because A, she needed to distinguish between the juniors in blue pants and the seniors because apparently the very distinct red and white shirts weren't enough, and B, if some people wore tartan pants and some didn't, the uniform wasn't consistent. Well, at first, most people laughed at this, and as it got progressively colder, we stopped wearing the school-provided blue pants, as they were super itchy, and moved on to these blue sweatpants that were honestly basically indistinguishable except for being thicker. The new principal caught wind of this and told us that any seniors caught wearing blue pants would be sent to detention. Our school didn't even have detentions because the students were, for the most part, incredibly well behaved. Well, aside from being well behaved, our student population was also not a fan of dictatorship or misogyny. It was argued that her comments on our clothing were anti-feminist and perpetuated stereotypes of women being told what to wear. It became a whole thing. Our blue sweatpants came from a chain retail store, so we were all wearing the same ones, and they were cheaper and better quality than the school-provided tailored pants, which, may I add, were wool, so itchy, and slim-fitting. Once again, it was argued this was misogynistic because we were forced to either show off our legs or wear skirts. At one point, seniors stopped wearing skirts altogether out of protest, and whenever the principal told someone to go to detention, that student would just point at her entire class and ask if she was going to give us all detention. This enraged the principal, but literally nobody, teacher or pupil, could care less. At one point, the PNC met and they unanimously decided to change the uniform policy to allow seniors to wear blue pants, as it had been allowed before, just not written down. And you can guess who the only holdout was. Then one day, the principal got sick of it, set up all the exam desks in the hall, and made every single senior wearing sweatpants sit in the hall for detention. As I mentioned, we were a high-scoring school, so again, no one minded as we sat quietly and did practice papers in a very realistic environment. The principal started doing random school-wide uniform checks during class time, told all teachers to send down students in wrong uniform, until my math teacher told her she was disrupting our learning time and she should wait until after school. Literally, nothing she could do worked. As we headed back into summer, we started wearing skirts again, which made it easier for the principal to single out sweatpants wearing students. However, another one of my teachers whose daughter went to the school and whose wife was on the PNC board contacted the chain retail store which I mentioned, asked them if they would become our permanent uniform supplier as our contract with the old guys who did pants was ending. We had different suppliers for pants since they were a recent addition to the uniform. So after the spring break, I was one of few seniors still wearing sweatpants, and the principal came over and berated me for wearing pants. Honestly, half of this one-sided conversation was her implying girls shouldn't be wearing pants in the first place, and I should have been wearing a skirt. I simply told her it was literally the uniform now. Safe to say, she got replaced real quick after someone on the PNC got really mad. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Zosted. It says, I have 12 ridiculous years of Catholic school under my belt. To this day, every time I see plaid, I break out in hives. I have a lifelong aversion to tartan because of it. I also have a lifelong aversion to religion, but that's for another post. I love how in this story the teachers got together and they decided they were going to go around the current principal who was being a pain in the butt. They got the retailer for the pants that the kids wanted to wear approved as the official uniform behind the principal's back, and it sounds like they didn't even tell the principal that they did it in the first place. Wow. This story comes to us from Turkey Ninja. Hallways had lanes for students to get them to class faster. I was a teacher at a middle school in 2014-2015 that was a Title I school, extremely low income and test scores. The state government actually removed all administration staff 2 years prior for the whole district as the student outcomes were so low. The new admin came in with a micromanagement authoritarian directive to improve test scores. One of their brightest ideas was to put lanes in the hallways to manage flow and get students to classes faster. There were 3 lanes, 2 one-ways along the walls, and a middle teacher-only lane. Within about 3 days, all the students were driving imaginary cars. They orderly followed one another, would let people in to merge, use turn signals, and generally was pretty fun for a few days. The teachers would direct students at intersections and played along for a bit. The flow did slow down though, as students wouldn't pass each other and would have trouble merging into traffic around doorways. Another thing taking time was the students parking their imaginary vehicles outside the classroom. They would spend time backing them into spaces or have trouble parallel parking. The admin didn't like this and really started getting angry at the staff and students as so many kids were still tardy to class. They actively were handing out detentions and pretty angry at staff for playing along. This really triggered the students to start getting malicious. The students couldn't cross the middle lane, so they would have to walk down long hallways and make U-turns to see their friends or get to their lockers in classrooms. They started cruising the long hallways with their tricked out imaginary lowriders. They would have shock noises even. Some of the really popular kids started a bus system where they had a schedule to pick up other students and deliver them to other classes. They would hold shoulders and move as a block. Sometimes the bus broke down at an intersection and blocked traffic for everyone. Drag racing started where they held up traffic and raced down the hallways. Police would pull people over and write tickets. The most annoying part was students needing to leave the classroom to check on their cars to make sure no one stole it. Sometimes a student would come back from the bathroom and ask if anyone was driving a type of car as it was being towed. The disruptions in class started to really get out of control. Admin thought it was going to be a phase and students would get bored. The best part about school for the students turned out to be the time in between classes. Everyone was tardy constantly. Eventually the lanes were ripped up and they shortened the passing period time by 2 minutes, so students had to rush to class and couldn't spend any time in the hallways. The cars slowly died out and the new fad was needing to use the restroom during class time because the passing period was like 3 minutes long and not enough toilets to satisfy all the students legitimately. Students were written up for needing to use the bathroom, so kids just started clogging toilets and peeing wherever. Other car things, flat tires, emergency sirens, car accidents, GPS problems, no gas, lost license, couldn't find keys, stole other kids' cars, repo cars, and towing cars. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called CoderJoe1. It says, "Sorry I was late. I couldn't find an outlet for my imaginary electric car because some jerk with an imaginary Escalade parked in front of the only outlets." Okay, I absolutely love this story. The kids were having fun in the hallways and some of the teachers were getting involved as well. They should have used this as a learning opportunity. They could have had those kids optimizing traffic, city planners, that kind of thing, making everything flow properly. But they had to be party poopers and make it all go away. Ugh. I wish when I was in school that we did something like this. It would have made the day a lot more fun than the crappy school experience that I had. This story comes to us from Red Apples for Break. Wanna go for a walk? It had been a hot summer day, but by this point it was early evening. The temperature was going down, and there was a nice breeze. So when my boyfriend asked what we should do this evening, I suggested we go out for a walk. He was a little hesitant, but with some light prodding, he reluctantly agreed. We decided to go to Island Park, not its real name, which is a large city park wildlife sanctuary that spreads across 1,200 acres with 30 miles of paths along 9 different loops. It's a popular spot in our town, but large enough to still feel secluded. As we're parking, he's grumbling a bit about how we always go to this park. How far are we going to go out? It's going to be hot, etc., etc. We get about a half-mile out, and he asks me how far we plan to go. I don't know. Would you like to turn back? No, it's fine, he says, and we continue on. I decide to follow his lead, since it sounds like he'll likely want to end the walk before I do, which is fine. We go a little further, and we're starting to reach portions of the park I'm not familiar with. But my boyfriend used to jog in this park all the time, and so he knows the paths better than I do. Does this path loop around? I ask, and he assures me that it does. We continue on for another mile, and we're in a part of the park I didn't even know existed. Well, yeah, he admits, I took you out the long way so you would regret making me go on this walk. Oh, malicious compliance. If I wanted to go on a walk, he was going to make sure it was a long one. He wanted my feet to hurt and my legs to ache, so I'd think twice before asking him to go out in nature again. Let me tell you, this path was beautiful. The trees were tall and luxurious, the views were outstanding, and the birds were singing their hearts out. I couldn't have been happier. Then he got lost and we ended up walking 4 miles to get to the parking lot. But it was a great walk and a fun adventure. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go ice my foot while I watch 7 episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation. So, OP, you mean to tell me that you just said on Reddit that your boyfriend's a bit of a butthead, and then you mentioned that you're gonna go home and watch some Star Trek? All the nerds on Reddit right now are going, woman who likes Star Trek, and your inbox is going to be full. Well done. Keep dragging that guy out into the wilderness. It sounds like he needs the walks, and you deserve the time together, right? This story comes to us from Who Knew I'd Like It. Paperwork not good enough the first time? No problem. We will do it again, but you're paying. Years ago, I worked in an isolated location, all energy industry related. Due to the extent of the isolation, the client company had its own medical facilities, one of which I worked in. So one contract company had a thing about needing excessive paperwork for their guys who were sick. See, the medical care was a line item in the client company budget, so nobody saw a bill. This made for a system that was easily abused, what with no financial dog in the fight. So this one company's guys would come in periodically, appropriately sick. They weren't burning time, they only made money on duty, so they wanted to work. We'd see them and often give a day or two of bed rest before returning to work. Everyone there was typically on a 2-week tour of duty due to logistics, so a day or two like this wasn't uncommon or unreasonable. Patient would be seen, given a note for the boss, go get some rest and take your meds. But that wasn't good enough. Maybe for every other contractor, but no, this contractor was special. So even though they'd been seen by qualified medical staff and given prescriptions and a note on when they could return to work, this company wanted them evaluated again and another note saying they could actually go back on duty, even if it was 12 to 24 hours since the first visit. Remember, no cost, so what do they care, right? This didn't sit well with us. We had long hours and busy days, often 18 to 24 hours awake and on duty, with a 2-week tour of duty. And this was BS paperwork and time wasting because someone felt like it, not because it was medically necessary. If we'd seen the patient and given you a note on when they can go back on duty, my due diligence was done. So we decided after a couple of months of this pattern to accommodate them on our terms. Guys would come in ready and willing to go back to work, but still needing another note, because apparently the first one wasn't nearly good enough and the boss said so. So they'd get one on our terms. After we'd see all the morning sick call patients, after our scheduled morning appointments, they'd be on the clock until we saw them again, sitting in our waiting room, on the clock and drinking coffee, which was typically around 3 hours after the clinic opened. Each and every one of them, which was typically 2 to 3 guys every day. They were a big contractor. They were surprisingly slow to pick up on it. Took about a month of this approach, and once they put it all together, they were pissed. Clearly, we were wasting their time and ours. What the F did it matter? We were on duty and the care was free, so F our opinion. But our bosses backed us 100%, essentially saying, if you went to your doctor and paid for a visit, would you pay again to be told the same thing the next day? After that, the paperwork from medical staff was honored the first time, and everyone's workdays were more efficient. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Petal Honey Babe. It says, that was the slowest, most polite screw you I've ever seen. Beautiful work. Funnily enough, this just sounds like the triage system that we have here in the Canadian hospitals. Because if you go in and you're not dying, you'll be sitting in that waiting room for a very long time. Like I'm talking, you could be there 8-10 hours before they actually see you. Triage for the win. This story comes to us from Cassie D. Don't think anyone will care what I think and advise me to leave a negative review? Awesome. Let's see what happens. This is a long one, but I still enjoy it. Long ago, I was dumb enough to rent a house within the control of an HOA. I have since learned better. This property was managed by a company called City I Lived In Properties. They had purchased the house within the HOA and rented to us. But given that I wasn't actually in the HOA, I was just a renter, it became a really convoluted mess very quickly. We were told that we would need to adhere to the HOA guidelines, but we couldn't talk to the HOA directly, nor would we be able to receive a copy of the rules, but that it wasn't that serious. Most of their tenants didn't even hear from them. Should have said no right then, but I was young and dumb. The day I arrived at the property to move my stuff in, I was informed by my landlord that I was being fined $100 for my trash cans being visible from the street. Apparently because my trash can was delivered by the city 2 days prior to a place I didn't have access to, it was my responsibility to have driven across town and broken into the backyard to move the trash cans. The first infraction is a warning they never passed on. The second is $100. They said I was responsible for it, especially after the warning I literally never received. Then they told me that they would only accept payment in person going forward, even though my deposit and first month's rent were paid online, and it must be through a money order in person. Then they informed me the office for the City I Lived In Properties, which I'd never been to, is actually a 2-hour drive away, totally not in the city I live in. I told them this is my first day in. I got the keys an hour ago. There's no way I could have done this correctly. Surely it could be explained to the HOA that this couldn't be my fault. They said no, I couldn't talk to the HOA because I wasn't a member. Couldn't see the rules I was supposed to follow because the HOA only allows copies for members. Then they pointed me to a single line in the rental agreement that said I would follow the rules. After far more back and forth than should be required for something so ridiculous, we came to an agreement that they would cover the fine. But for some reason, it was impossible to waive the record of the infractions, and I would be halfway to eviction on day 1. All of it counted against me, but they'd do the $100. I asked if there were any more rules that I needed to be aware of up front, since I couldn't get a copy of the rules. They told me I had to mow every Thursday, because that and the trash can thing is what typically gets people in trouble. They do a walk by Fridays. If we mowed on Wednesday, it would be too long by then. If we did it Friday, they'd count it as not done. I mow the lawn every Thursday for months and keep my head down. I never even spoke to a neighbor or did anything to draw attention to myself. Around 3/4 of the way through the lease, I get a $400 fine on a Friday with a photo taken nearly in my backyard of my grass with a ruler next to it, which I had just mowed the day before. I missed a single tuft of grass behind the AC unit. It was less than half an inch above the rest of it. They'd walked through the yard to the back corner with a ruler to find an issue. They said this puts me on my final warning before eviction unless I could prove it was cut by a specific landscaping company owned by someone in the HOA. Apparently, the HOA only accepts work from them, and it's the only way to reverse a fine. I fought it hard, but ultimately I paid it because I was almost out. Then I started to pay to have it done by that company and kept receipts just in case. Around 2 months or so left in the lease, I get another notice. This time it's a $600 fine and a formal letter stating that I would be evicted and a picture of my grass fully mowed. No ruler, no indication that anything was really wrong, just a wide shot of my house with cut grass. Since the last time I was told that a receipt proving it was done by them could clear it up, I called the landlord up, offered to show them the copy of the receipt, told them to look at this picture or come by with a ruler, but it was done correctly. I figured it was a misunderstanding, and there's no way I'm actually getting evicted over this. A woman who I'd never spoken with answers the phone and comes in hot from the get-go. I calmly explain the situation to her. She isn't having any of it, cuts me off mid-sentence and says, I have to pay $600 today, then they're going to evict me. Refused to look at the receipt or the photo, tells me the buck stopped there and it's my fault for being a bad tenant, and to just save my breath and start packing. I told her I didn't recognize her voice and that I had been dealing with someone else. I asked how long she's been there. 2 days, I just started. I asked to speak with someone else who might be more experienced. There is nobody else. We don't need to continue any further than you giving me my money. I started to say, I think that I need to speak to someone else again. Nobody else works here and no one cares what you think. Stop trying to get out of it and be a man. I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but now it was the principle of the thing. I was like, I'm pretty sure someone cares what I think, and I know they didn't just hire you and leave you alone in the office. Then go write your opinion on Google or something, where we can all go back to ignoring you. If you call back, you're only ever going to talk to me because this isn't worth anyone else's time. I said, oh, don't worry. I will get right on that, and I promise you're going to care in the end. This woman started listing off review websites saying that they don't care and no one cares about me. Go to Yelp, go to this place and this place because no one cares. I wrote them all down, asked for her name. She gave that too, and I wrote that down. Then I told her I'd be in touch. Cue the malicious compliance. This was early in the morning, and I had to go to work, but it was an office job that allowed me some leeway when my work could be done as long as all of it got done before the end of the week. I cleared my whole day. I didn't get a single other thing done. I found every online site that even halfway mentioned them, and I wrote an entire scathing review on every one of them. Not just copy and paste, but fully hashed out in every single place fresh. I even contacted the local news organization, though they never got back to me, but the attempt was made. I ripped them a new one in every method I could. Their website, Yelp, Google, Zillow, every single place that had a message box. I was doing it up in bed to the point I passed out late at night. Most of these places had no reviews or 1 5-star review, so it definitely didn't go unnoticed. 8 a.m., I get a call from the VP of the property company. She'd flown in from Florida, where she was on vacation, to figure out why they suddenly had all these super negative, super specific reviews. I said, oh, so there is someone else who works there. The VP tells me that she's read the reviews and that while she's sorry this was my experience, this was libel or whatever, since I wrote it in a public place and that they'd sue. I told her it's not libel if it's a true account of my experience, which it was. I added that her new employee even told me the places I could write my opinion because no one was ever going to care what I said. I was just following instructions. They were also evicting me based on something that was demonstrably false, so it's not like I had anything to lose. She got really quiet, then pops herself up and started getting an attitude. Says I'd be hearing from her lawyers soon. I said, oh, great, were they on vacation too? She hung up. I think it was an hour or two later, I get another call from the president of the property company this time. They looked at my receipt for the lawn care and looked at the photo and saw that it was very obviously wrong and were dropping the charge. We were not going to be evicted. Not only that, but they'd straightened it out with the HOA, and the first 2 infractions were also dropped. My $400 infraction was actually only a warning as a first infraction, so I'd be getting that money back. And to top it all off, the wretched woman who told me that no one would ever care what I think was fired by him personally before the call, which is what took the hour or 2. Apparently, she was in tears. They asked if I would take down or at least revise some of my reviews so it didn't ruin their company's reputation. I left them all up even after I moved out and never answered another call from them again. Someone's dog may or may not have also taken a dump underneath their doormat and accidentally stomped on it after a 2-hour drive to drop off the last money order. Impossible to tell really, but who cares anyway? Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Just Do It Guy. It says, adherence to HOA rules by renters must be in the rental agreement, including a list of the rules. So I found this one would be a little bit confusing from OP's standpoint because they were paying the money for the infractions to the property company and not directly to the HOA. And I don't think they got any notifications from the HOA saying exactly what was going on. Like, they didn't get the notices, the property company did. And the property company could have been inflating those numbers to get more money out of OP. That kinda sucks. Even if we disregard that part, let's take a look at the person who told OP to put their reviews in because they wouldn't matter. This person had only been working there for 2 days, and they're handing out advice like this? Did they just not like the job already and not want to be there? Did they wake up on the wrong side of the bed? Did somebody piss in their cornflakes? Because it seems like they might have been having a really bad day. I'm glad it worked out for OP in the end, but oh my gosh, another reason why to never go into an area with an HOA, whether you're buying or renting. This story comes to us from Jeezen. You need to message me when finished with a client before going to the next one, as you wish. A few years ago, I worked as a tech support guy, salesperson, at a small family-owned computer store in my hometown. It wasn't a franchise, just a local shop. The owner, a mustached, arrogant dude who could never admit when he was wrong. No matter what went wrong, it was always someone else's fault. That constant blame game was a big reason why I ended up quitting, but that's another story. At the time, my main job was delivering products to clients and doing on-site tech support at their homes or businesses. Now, for some context, my boss was obsessed with the idea that I was too slow during client visits. No matter how long I actually took, be it 5 minutes or 2 hours, it was always too much in his eyes. He couldn't seem to understand that tech problems vary and can take different amounts of time to fix. And, of course, he loved to compare us to past employees. Back when so-and-so worked here, he was way faster than you. Funny thing is, I knew that when so-and-so worked there, the boss used to say he was slow and someone else was better. That was just his thing, guilt-tripping whoever was working for him at the time. Fast forward a bit, one day he was in an extra bad mood and decided that from now on, I should message him every single time I finished with a client and wait for his reply before moving on. Same thing when I arrived somewhere, message him to say I'd arrived. He wanted this done through WhatsApp, SMS, or even a phone call. If I didn't have credit, I was supposed to make a collect call where the person receiving the call pays. Not sure how common that is elsewhere. Basically, he didn't trust that I was working and thought I might be wasting time between clients or just riding around town. Spoiler, there's not much to see. I was annoyed, but sure, whatever. Rules are rules. Day 1, I followed the rule to the letter. Arrived at a client, message. Finish the job, message and wait. I lost way more time waiting for responses than I ever did between jobs, but okay. Day 2, same deal. Morning went by. After lunch, I loaded up the bike with deliveries and gear and headed out. First client of the afternoon messaged when I arrived. He replied. Fixed the issue. It didn't even take 30 minutes, so I messaged when finished. No response. Waited 5 minutes, nothing. Called him, no answer. Waited another 5 minutes, still nothing. So I sat down on the curb under a tree and waited. Watched some videos, scrolled through Facebook, chatted with friends, and I waited and waited. Almost 3 hours passed. I just sat there doing nothing, waiting on the guy who demanded that I never move on without his go-ahead. Eventually, my phone rang. "Where are you?" "Still at Client X's place." "Still? He was the first one this afternoon. The day's almost over. Just go back here." "On my way back now." I got back to the store and was greeted by him practically foaming at the mouth. "Why the heck did you take so long? You're so slow." I looked him straight in the eye. "I was following your rule. You told me to notify you every time I finished a client and wait for your reply before moving on. You didn't respond, so I waited. I'd never go against your orders." He froze, just stared at me. He didn't know what to say. Then he tried to backpedal. "Well, you should use common sense. If I didn't answer, it's because I was busy." Turns out he'd spent the whole afternoon dealing with contractors and problems at his house renovation, and just completely forgot he'd given me that rule. Needless to say, that rule was never mentioned again. I went back to the old way of doing things. But, of course, he still kept complaining that I took too long with clients. Some things never change. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Kayoshi the Powerful. It says, "At least you know that after you quit, you were suddenly the gold standard for every subsequent employee. Why can't you be as fast as OP?" OP responded and said, "That's exactly how it went, laugh out loud. A friend of mine who worked there after me told me that he still complained and used me as a good example of speed. Go figure." Another commenter down below called Appointment OK 7638 said, "I want to hear more about this mustache." OP responded and said, "Think about Mario, a fatter Mario without a hat and with glasses. That's him. He even says that he has roots in Italy." There's nothing funny about that mustache, but that's the first thing I remember when thinking about him. My gosh, this guy sounds a lot like my Rick. You know, the guy that craps out golden nuggets. It really does make me wonder how people can go through life being so pissy on a day-to-day basis. It's really gotta suck to have that kind of an outlook on life. Seriously, I feel like Rick and this guy had the same ethos. They would go into work and just crap all over everybody there, and then go home at the end of the day feeling like they'd done a wonderful job at work. Ugh, screw you, Rick, and screw you, OP's boss. This story comes to us from Two Balls in the Hole. "We never have time to do it correct, but we always have time to do it again." Longtime listener, first time caller. I ran the mail department in a good-sized commercial printing company. Most of my day was filled with taking customer mailing lists and processing them so they get discounts at the post office. But occasionally, I produce consecutively numbered items, red raffle tickets. Now, raffle tickets are small, maybe 1 by 4 inches, too small to run the machine by themselves. We decided to run them 4 across and 2 high, so 8 raffle tickets per sheet. I created a spreadsheet in Excel that had 8 columns, 1 for each raffle ticket position. The raffle tickets in this particular case were printed on a special type of paper that has a holographic background. Very expensive. The process of setting up the inkjet machine to print the 8 numbers in 2 spots on each raffle ticket is to find the appropriate XY position for the first ticket number to be placed on the customer portion, then copy that number to be replaced on the part of the ticket that is ripped off and given to the administrators of the raffle. Now, I have coordinates that I can extrapolate to the remaining 7 positions. Having copied and pasted the original 2 text boxes using extrapolated XY coordinates, they were all showing the exact same raffle number, the first row and column in my spreadsheet. While I was going through the process of changing position 2 to reflect the data in the second column, position 3 to reflect the data in the third column, etc., my always in a hurry manager showed up and, right in front of my entire department, yelled, "Why is this machine not running yet?" I was currently halfway through updating the 5th out of 8 tickets. I told him that it wasn't set up yet. I still had some work to do to get it ready. He looked at the screen and could see that there was data for all 8 tickets, all 16 positions had a text box associated. Never mind if the text box contained the correct data or not, they all had data associated. Happy to tell you, I pushed back hard. I didn't give him specifics, just that the setup was not complete and cannot be run as is. He asked, I crap you not, what's it gonna take to get this machine running right now? Easy, I'll simply comply. I handed him the last piece that came out of the machine. Mind you, position 6, 7, and 8 all contained data for position 1, and position 5 was only half right, and said, if you want to put your signature on this piece, we can run it right now, but I'm not signing off on it until I verified the accuracy of all 16 positions. The next day was heck. More special paper had to be purchased and delivered FedEx overnight, 1st AM delivery, rush job to print and cut and deliver to my department. Rush to imprint correctly, positions 5 through 8, cut to final size, box and deliver to the customer. Job was late. We lost any profit we were looking forward to through overnight delivery, reprint, etc., etc., etc. I just smiled and did my job, never said a word, but the look on his face when he told me I had to redo half the job was priceless. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Ambitious Ganache 891. It says, were there any consequences from his boss? OP responded and said, not that I could see directly, but he never tried to rush me through something when I said that it wasn't ready ever again. Isn't this one a case of you can get something done quickly, correctly, or cheaply, but you can only pick 2 of those? In the printing world, I believe the profit margins are really thin to begin with, so something like this would absolutely be a setback for the company, and I really do hope that boss got a stern talking to from whoever is above them. This story comes to us from Shibu Ringo. Stay in your lane. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss how we were going to recover from a major problem on the manufacturing line that had reduced production throughput to about 50%. I was not on the production team. I was there to stay informed as the design engineering lead for the project. The problem was software in certain older assembly units in half of the production lines. The best estimate projection from the manufacturing director was that patch, test, and functional confirmation of these units would take a week to 10 days. I suggested that we should contact the manufacturer of the newer, functioning units and find out how quickly they could deliver and install replacements for every problem assembler on the lines. Yes, I know, it was a very expensive suggestion. The VP running the meeting simply told me to stay in your lane. You don't know anything about the real work done around here. Having worked elsewhere for nearly a decade in manufacturing prior to transitioning to design engineering and the role at this company, I actually knew all about the real work being done. I also knew that the projection of about 7 to 10 days for a firmware fix for those machines was nothing more than a very deep pile of male bovine excrement. By my rough calculations, it would take at least 3 weeks to complete unit replacement and get the throughput rate back up to a marginally acceptable level. I stayed in my lane. I kept my lips zipped for the remainder of the meeting. I told my director afterwards that the production team had it under control and that I was no longer needed. Following an email discussion thread CC'd to everyone at the meeting and my director that included my ridiculous suggestion and my humble acknowledgement that I really should stay in my lane, I moved on to a new project. 3 weeks later, after multiple failed attempts to update the old assemblers, the work to replace them all with new units began. 3 weeks after that, production was hovering at about 75%, and finally reached 95% after an additional 2 weeks. Grapevine, heard but no way to substantiate, the manufacturing director was the scapegoat and was let go. The VP's yearly bonus was impacted due to a $450,000 shortfall in revenue. I continued to stay zip-lipped during all production meetings, discussions, email threads, etc. until I left the company a year later. I stayed in my lane. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called CadNinja82. It says, what the VP should have said was, thanks for the idea, we'll take it into consideration. Potentially the same underlying message as what he actually said, but more fitting for his title and pay grade. One of the things you really need to learn in management is how to make people feel like they're being listened to. even if you're really not listening to them and not taking any of their ideas into consideration. It's really as easy as a simple acknowledgement of their idea, like the commenter just said. Thanks for that idea, we'll take that into consideration. I don't know, I think if I were OP in this case, I probably would have said something to them before I left, like, hey, we could have saved a lot of time if you'd actually listened to me in that meeting. And then I'd walk out with both fingers up over my head as I'm walking away. This story comes to us from Pumpkin Crouton. When is lunch? I worked at night fixing machinery. Easy gig. When something broke, they would call me and I would fix it. Oddly, things refused to break on a schedule. Often, I would clock out for lunch just before the end of the shift, clock back in, then clock off and go home. For me, my lunch was flexible. If I was fixing something, with many people standing around not able to work, I fixed it. Occasionally, I had to warm my lunch in the microwave several times before I had time to eat it. Most nights were slow, and I could eat anytime I wanted. Sometimes, I'd get a call during lunch, and I'd go fix it. Somewhat awkward to keep looking at the clock, stop what I was fixing to go clock back on. I was yelled at. I was told I had to take a full 30-minute lunch off the clock on schedule and couldn't work when I was off the clock. I mentioned that when I worked a different job at the same company years before, the truck stop down the road had great steak and eggs. Maybe they still do. Boss said I can't leave the property. I told him, 1, if I'm off the clock, you darn sure won't be seeing me because I won't be here. 2, in 10 years, I've never had a scheduled time for lunch. 3, you pick the 30 minutes during the night when absolutely nothing gets fixed because I'm off the clock or gone. Never heard another word. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Balulio. It says, that's the old axiom. If you don't schedule equipment maintenance, the equipment will schedule the equipment maintenance. Opie responded and said, they did maintenance during the day when most of the plant was down, but during the night when the equipment was actually being used, belts break, bearings seize up, wiring to sensors gets smacked, any number of things occurs. Most times I was there working alone. Some folks thought their job was to fix things. I believe my job was to make the machinery run until morning, usually fixing the problem, occasionally workarounds. I believe it's labor law in North America here, Canada, and USA that if you're not allowed to leave for your lunch, they have to pay you for your time. Because if you can't leave, it's not actually a real break because you're required to still be at work. So they would legally owe you for that time. You know, they say that equipment doesn't fail and break on a schedule, but OP, you could make it fail or break on a schedule if you wanted to. You know, just do that preventative break before you go on your lunch, just to make sure that it's down before you leave. This story comes to us from Raw Lee, receptionist to office coordinator real quick, haha. Worked as a front desk at a medium-sized company. Wait, what? I'd been here for 2 years now, and aside from answering phone calls, I quietly fix tech issues, help schedule meetings, proofread reports, whatever needed doing. Like, I was doing a lot more than my job description because I love the people here. One day, our ex-manager, let's call him Derek, we're not close because he's too high of himself, overheard me helping someone format a document and said, why are you doing that? You're just a receptionist. Stay in your lane. So I did. The rest of the week, I politely declined everything that wasn't listed in my original job description. Just my role, no more, no less. Didn't reset the Wi-Fi router, didn't refill the office printer paper, didn't track packages or help schedule meetings, let callers ring endlessly while I was away from the desk. It wasn't even listed as part of my job description. Chaos ensued. Derek was the first to complain. My response? I'm just the receptionist. I let him take his own medicine. Then the CEO ended up calling me into his office to promote me to office coordinator. It happened. OP, I think you forgot at the end here, isn't this the point where everybody clapped? I mean, you're trying to tell us that you decided to stop doing all the extra stuff in the office and they rewarded you for it? If this story's true, I hope you got a big raise and that you're actually doing the things you were doing before while getting paid more to do it. This story comes to us from MD Lapla. We can name the team? Let's have some fun. I worked for a big consulting company around 2005, the kind that grinds employees and shatters their morale, underpays and overworks, you know the kind. This one had multiple clients, sectors, and teams. So HR, in their ever-blessing wisdom, thought that it would be a big team-building exercise to create an internal football tournament between all the projects that wanted to join. Bear in mind, this was in Argentina. We're passionate about football. Probably way too much for our own good, and we love our little get-togethers to play. So, multiple teams joined. With people of all categories, it was a good team-building idea. Managers and partners playing side to side with the temp guy who just started. Hey, I mean, crazier things have been organized for the sake of team building. I worked on a project where we were stuck in a cave. The manager was, well, like most of the managers I've met in those kinds of companies. They are there because they can lick the boots of the clients better than anyone, and they're really good at being able to work their disposable people to the bone. We wanted to join, and we wanted to have kits made for the tournament, so one of the guys had the idea to ask the manager for the money for the kits, and manager said enthusiastically yes and gave us the money. But then he said, I want to play, I want to join the team, and we couldn't say no, so he was in. Then came the last and beautiful question of how to name the team. Manager said, oh, I have no idea, whatever you want, so we complied. For the first 4 games, until he tore his ACL, manager played rather poorly against colleagues, other managers, and partners, and had to answer the one question he didn't want to be asked. What's the name of your team? Because the team name was the Worn Out Slaves. P.S. We lost the semifinals to the eventual champions, sadly. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Speculatrix. It says, I worked at an office here in the UK where the meeting rooms all had place names. There was no obvious pattern. It turned out some geniuses had named them after mental hospitals. How they got that past the management, I don't know. Alright, let me know in the comments on this one, either on YouTube or on Spotify, what other names could they have used for that team that would have made that manager look absolutely horrible? Drop your comments down below and I'll respond to as many as I can. Alright, this story comes to us from, and I apologize for this, Moist Curdy Maxi Pad. You want me to go home? Okay. I worked at a restaurant. We had a front salad bar, a buffet with a salad bar, as well as things like a juice bar and an ice cream counter, and a small alcohol room with a bar. It was so popular and also a bit expensive, but somehow so underpaid, understaffed, and poorly managed. Jenny is the daughter and the only child of the owners of the restaurant. She's extremely spoiled. She almost always gets her way, and she has a temper where she will get pissed off and just lay into the person for an hour straight. She used to come in screaming at everyone for nothing and made racist or nasty jokes. She'd push people to come in sick and then ask why they were so slow. Just the typical manager from hell. Marco, one of the kitchen managers, is the son of a family friend and a beloved member of the community. His management consisted of micromanaging, criticizing our work, blaming random people for things, giving extreme time constraints for tasks, encouraging everyone to smile, and going around asking people while they were in the middle of working their 3 jobs when they wanted to come in the next day or if they'd like to cover a shift on Saturday or whatever. He would forget to do things and then blame other people. Then he would go around criticizing people for their time management or responsibility. Anytime we reported that something was broken or something wasn't working, he just told us to figure it out and nothing would be done about it until Jenny came in screaming at everyone and narrowed it down to Marco. We had other managers coming in and out. They couldn't take it. There were people who were suddenly hired to take on big positions despite having no idea what they were doing, or joined with less than a full day of training just because the place was desperate. The waitresses were paid less than $4 an hour, and some of them were doing part of the dishwasher's duties, front manager duties, cleaning job including kitchen and employee bathroom. I want to say dishwashing was the worst, as 3 different people would come to work drunk or high every day just to tolerate everything. My coworker DJ kept up even when the other dishwashers weren't working, helped me or the waitress clean and literally had to monitor food that was cooking, and he'd keep track of orders because the manager Marco and the chef wanted to mess around or go stand by the door and smoke. There were days where staff members would break down or get sick, pulling a double shift, and he did everything for them. There was no choice. My job was preparing and filling food items for the main salad bar in front every day, and some days I also did salad bar in the buffet. I had other things to do as part of my normal salad buffet job, including making food for reservations, preparing and stocking the juice bar, and helping move stock into the freezers and fridge. On top of that, I was packing non-salad food for delivery and takeout, helping maintain and stock up to half the buffet, helping waitresses keep up with the serving and bussing, doing ice cream and desserts, cleaning the whole kitchen and storage areas, and customer bathrooms, helping the bar staff, helping at the front desk whenever I was out, and preparing ingredients or fetching things for the normal chef and buffet chefs. All for little more than minimum wage. I fell every day because I was running on wet floors, and I had a heat stroke, and even had to go to the ER for injuries. On buffet days, I had a partner, but that didn't matter. She just stood around right in front of the manager Marco, talking to her cousin, who worked there, while watching me work, and both she and Marco would take breaks every now and then to criticize my work or my speed. Everything was held together by DJ and me. We were teenagers on Rockstar drinks, so we took whatever was coming to us. We kept everything going so well that we got scheduled to work almost every day, then every weekend. Jenny gave us free soda privilege, and we got raises 2 times in 5 months, which were only 10 cents, but it did look good to me because my dad praised all of my paychecks. He didn't know what was going on, and that I was working crazy hours, and he thought I was overpaid. Most of the customers were very sweet, so we tried our best to be of service, and a lot of them were regulars or people who came in to support Marco or everyone. There was always so much pressure on DJ and me. Also, DJ isn't white, and he would always get racist jokes and comments towards him. Marco and Jenny either did nothing or were the offenders. Most of the criticism or Marco's projection went to him, despite him doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing and occasionally messing up due to extreme stress or time constraint. After a certain point, almost every criticism was race-based in some way. One horrible Saturday, there were 3 times as many reservations as usual, on top of all bars and buffet being open. I clocked in and found out one of the managers let go of DJ the afternoon before. Absolutely no one knew why, including DJ, and I'm really assuming it was Marco. I already had zero hope for the day, and the only thing fueling me was the customers and my paycheck, of course. In just the first hour, I passed Marco at least 5 times trying to get things done. There was one time we accidentally made eye contact while I was helping a waitress. But at some point I went to the freezer in the back to help load some ice cream in, and he happened to walk in at the same time that I was standing there for 3 seconds, doing nothing, waiting for my coworker to bring in the dolly. He gave me this frustrated look like, "Get back to work." He caught me maybe a half hour later while I was coming into the back of the kitchen near the freezer to mop up some spilled water. The final time he caught me, I was in the freezer again looking at the inventory to see what fruit we had enough of, because I could only serve what we had enough of in case people requested more. And Marco had enough. He said, "The place is busy as F, and you're in here just standing in the freezer for like 4 hours. Go home." I gave this look like WTF, and he reiterated that I was done for the night. I was not arguing with Marco. This was not my problem. I just said thanks, took my apron off, and headed out. Both the employee doors were blocked by trash cans, and my partner standing there with the whole cart of things talking to her cousin, so I went to use the main side door in the front of the restaurant. Jenny saw me and asked where I was going. I put on a smile and said, "Man, Marco is the best guy ever. He just randomly came up to me and told me to take the night off." Jenny's face went from confused to shocked to livid in the span of 1 second. She quickly told me, "Don't go just yet," and she stormed into the kitchen screaming, "Marco!" I pretended to not hear her over the music and customers, and I just turned around and left. I got over 10 phone calls, but I simply let my phone ring. I waited until my partner updated her Facebook status with "finally closed, girl nighttime," or something like that, and I finally texted Marco back and gave an apology that sucked up in the most condescending way, but in a way that was personal that only he would understand if he were to show it to someone. I came back the next morning and it was a complete disaster. Marco and Jenny came in looking dead tired because they spent the rest of the night and overtime busting butt, trying to keep things going. There were actually dishes and trash bags piled up, and both the buffet and kitchen were wrecked because Jenny and her dad didn't want to keep the workers late and pay them overtime. The restaurant had to close for the summer. They posted all these job opportunities in schools and on Facebook and eventually opened back up, but I never answered, and DJ didn't accept amends, so it was a whole spiral. Because of me leaving and DJ being fired, they had to close down their ice cream and minimize their buffet, and they now close earlier because they can't handle it. There are less customers supporting Marco, and there were even customers saying they aren't coming back until Marco or Jenny leaves. There's a waitress who joined during my time there, and it was her first job ever. Now, she is the only previous employee left, and she ended up getting appointed as a manager at some point. I think they had to offer her a lot of money to stay because she bought a new house. Marco is the only other manager now. Marco is still asking me to come back, and since I deleted Facebook, I kept that phone number open with prepaid service on my old phone just for the purpose of reading his texts during my lunch. Hey OP, I'm seeing some opportunity here. They want you to come back and work. They're sending you texts to come back and work. You should say, okay, I'll come back, but you're going to make me a manager, and this is the wage that I want. And it's going to be a lot higher than what you had before. Then, once you have a chance to work in that manager position for a few months, use that new title to get you a job somewhere else where you'll actually be appreciated. That's how a lot of people do things these days. They use leverage to get into a different company, and then they do the same thing over there and use leverage to get into another company from there. Just hopscotching back and forth between companies and getting into higher positions every time. I truly do hope you were able to find a company that doesn't have a bunch of airheads for managers and that you're doing very well at this point. This story comes to us from Candle Gleam. Dress more appropriately for church? Sure, I'll follow the rule literally. A couple years ago, I joined a small but tight-knit church community. Everyone was pretty relaxed. People came in jeans, dresses, even t-shirts sometimes, especially at youth services. No one was disrespectful, just comfortable. I usually wore long skirts or dress pants and nice tops. Nothing flashy, and definitely nothing revealing. But apparently, that wasn't churchy enough for one particular elder, an older woman. After service one day, she pulled me aside and said, with that sweet fake smile, "Sweetheart, I just want to encourage you to dress a bit more appropriately. We should always look our best for the Lord." I was confused. I asked what exactly was inappropriate about my outfit. A long navy skirt, a tucked-in blouse, and flats. She said, "It's not bad, but, not quite holy attire. Maybe think about what you'd wear if Jesus was sitting in the front row." The next Sunday, I showed up in my most over-the-top church outfit. Full floor-length choir robe, white gloves, a wide-brimmed hat with a fake bird and a little veil. Bible in hand, stockings, low heels, and pearls. I looked like I was either about to preach, get baptized, or time travel back to 1954. People stared. One usher asked if I was part of the clergy now. Someone whispered, "Is she in a play?" And bless her heart, the elder gave me a stunned little nod when I sat close to her and said, "You look very reverent today." Thank you. I figured this is how Jesus would want me to show up. Next week, back to my usual outfit, never got a comment again. Okay, I love this one, and I'm sorry for all the religious people out there, but I gotta poke at this a little bit because what would you wear if Jesus was in the front row? Well, mate, if Jesus was in the front row, I don't think anybody would care what I'm wearing because none of the attention would be on me. That's one way that OP could have responded to this older lady. Another one would have been, what if Jesus were in the front row? Well, isn't he here already? Now, I'm not a religious person at all, but even I know that when they teach people about Jesus, they teach that he is non-confrontational, non-judgmental, and he welcomes everybody with open arms. So what is up with this older lady? I think she needs to go back and read that book again. This story comes to us from Robert R4836. Talk to the hand. I've commented about this, I think it fits here. In the late 80s, I was asked to work at my pharmacy job full-time during summer break from college. I was the only young full-time worker and the only male among a group of mom to grandma-aged women, mostly working mother's hours. My half-hour lunch was supposed to start at noon, but for some reason, my relief just wouldn't show up no matter how often I paged them. 15 minutes, a half hour, an hour, or more. It didn't bother me, so I didn't complain about it. That first Friday, I finally get to break a little after 1 p.m., and the store manager comes in and starts telling me she has had multiple complaints that I have been screwing up everyone's break schedule and how disappointed she is in me. I try to tell her that my relief is not showing up, and she actually does the hand thing where she just puts her hand in my face and says, "Starting next week, I want you back on main register at 12:30 sharp. No excuses." So next Monday, I start paging my relief at 1:15. At 5 I call for second or backup register, who is surprised since there is only one customer. I tell her to open second register. I close main, lock my drawer in the office, and punch out right at noon sharp. About 10 minutes later, the store manager comes running into the break room in a panic, asking why main register is closed. There's a line, and more importantly, why is main register closed? On Friday, you told me I had to be off main register at noon sharp. No excuses. That's not what I said. Did you say starting next week I have to be back on main register at 12:30 sharp? No excuses? Yes, that's what I said. And is my break a half hour long? Silence for a moment, and then, "Can you please punch back in and take care of the line? I'll find your relief." My relief showed up at 5 to noon for the rest of the summer. Jumping into the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Area 51 Resident. Awesome. It says, "Don't do what I told you to do. Do what I imagined you should have done." We hear so many stories on this channel of people who just work absurd hours, don't take breaks, and just give all this extra time to companies for absolutely no return. I don't understand it. Let this be a message to everybody out there that I firmly believe if you have a break scheduled, you should take said break and not work through it, because you need that time to let your brain do a bit of a reset, and working straight through the day just sucks, no matter what you're doing. This story comes to us from Kyle12345513. But there's no bleach. Background. Several years ago, I worked night shift for a big pharma producing injectables. There's very limited people running the place at that hour. I was relatively new there and only had limited training on things I was allowed to do and things I wasn't. The buildings were designed with airflow direction and flow patterns to prevent biological contamination. Can't go the other way or it's shut down, and a cleaning for about 3 to 4 hours. Nobody wants that. My compliance was being instructed to go get raw material X from an earlier room. So for me, that meant doing practically a full loop of the building, exiting completely, and starting over. Fine, only takes about 15 minutes. But the catch here is everything is more clean as you progress through the stages of the building, going through airlocks. Going through the airlocks means spraying objects that you're bringing in with bleach, giving it 10 minutes of contact time, wiping it down, then proceeding. My malicious compliance here is when I inform manager on duty the prior airlock had no bleach, he just interrupted me and said, "Now!" So I do as I'm told and hurry up, exit, go around, wash up, change my scrubs, the works. I get the material and just as expected, I get stuck in the airlock with no bleach to wipe down a cart of raw material. What manager wasn't aware of was I wasn't trained on mixing and making bleach. Yeah, easy enough in practice, but it's still a sign-off I wasn't trained on, so I simply couldn't. I was in there a good 2 hours until the manager found me. All I could do was point at the empty bleach container on the wall as he stared through the glass. He had to leave, do a lap, make bleach himself, wait another 30 minutes or so for bleach to settle, then join me in the airlock for another 10 minutes of contact time together in silence. Okay, so the weird thing on this one is that down in the comments, OP mentioned a couple of times that the boss was actually pretty great and chill. 9 out of 10 in their book. But this was a boss that was yelling at him to do something he wasn't trained to do, and he said in other comments, this boss was short with him all the time because he was a younger worker, and he didn't want to rock the boat because it was his first real adult job. Oh man, that's horrible. If OP still feels like this was a good boss, I can't imagine the bosses they've had since then. This story comes to us from Philip Ferdinand, flooding the monitor. A year ago, I got fired from a job as an efficiency lead. It happened a week after I mentioned that I was going to become a father, but that's another aspect. The reason I was hired was to dig deeper into company issues and find the root cause. My manager was thrilled to have an actual FBA on board. Cue her assistant manager. Since I needed to learn the ins and outs, she had me spending 70% of my time on useless tracking that she needed for her glorious monthly pivot tables. The thing is, noting down post-its, emails, and several other inputs into a spreadsheet gave me some much needed insight. Either, for example, the printers were being moved every month from one site to another, or there was a huge flaw. Some of those flaws would be considered major red flags for the equivalent of the IRS. When I started tracking them, as my job was exactly that, the assistant manager tried to block me from accessing several internal data sources. Since the manager and her assistant were pretty close, I tried to loop in the actual department responsible for the flaws. Less than a week later, the manager asked why I was snooping around other departments. Meanwhile, everyone I spoke to in those other departments was more than helpful in gathering information, even connecting me with counterparts at other sites. 2 days later, she notified me that she had asked IT for a full copy of my mailbox, which is illegal, and said she was not amused. From that point forward, I had to include her in every email I sent and document by the minute every case file I was working on. That last part led to the easiest malicious compliance. When I got a call, I noted it. When I went to get a coffee, I logged internal movements. Even someone poking their head in to say hi was noted. She received an Excel sheet with about 600 lines a day, including a line after each entry just for filling out the sheet. After 3 days, she was furious and said, I wasn't taking things seriously. Of course, I wasn't, but she didn't need to know that. I asked her to email me the specifics of what she wanted me to write down and to provide a route path for every project. She stormed off with a, you know what I want. I got an email from HR for a meeting. I told them everything, including notes from every meeting. They asked me to set up a spreadsheet with totals per day for each project and email it to the manager, including a note that I needed the information her assistant had blocked me from accessing. Including her in every email was fairly simple. It was only about 10% of my total communications. When the manager went on vacation, she said she liked the new way of working and told me to push forward on 3 main issues I had laid out. And of course, the assistant took her chance to step into the high chair. She said the emails weren't adequate and demanded a full report on every conversation. It started off innocently until I stumbled across an old file with the assistant's signature and those of several site managers. I began calling them and asking about the listed information. After about 5 phone calls and a short note emailed to the assistant, she stormed into the shared office, calling me a no-good golden retriever trying to find truffles in muck water. She demanded a full report on every future call. Cue Malicious Compliance number 2. I started using voice-to-text software to generate full transcripts of every call. Even a question like, how's the new cleaning lady doing, was fully written down. Imagine receiving an average of 4 hours a day in transcription. Because of the flood of text, she missed the pattern I was gently highlighting. A €1 million issue. When the manager returned, the assistant claimed I was harassing her. Without even a chance to reply, I received an official letter at my house informing me of an inquiry. The inquiry included the manager, someone from HR, and someone from the European chair. To top it all off, the assistant had given the manager a list of confidential documents that I had supposedly stolen from her private laptop, including that old file, which had been sitting on the server. When they asked why I needed that file, I explained that it pointed to a huge flaw concerning legal documents and payments, exactly what I was hired to investigate. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that I'd be out the door within a few days, so I started rattling the cage. I read over my initial job description and the internal guidelines for the role. The two guys I worked with went into a frenzy to uncover any consequences from that error. Site managers were alerted. Accounting started doing calculations. The last email I received was probably sent too early. OP falsified several documents on the server to get the manager and assistant manager into trouble. Any communication should be deleted by the end of the day. Needless to say, I had to pack my things. 3 months later, I ran into some guys from the company. Turned out the damage was done, but the cover-up was even worse. The avalanche of people involved who ended up quitting was undeniable. Some departments had over 50% of their workforce on leave due to mental health issues. The duo still works there, sitting on a lie that could still cost the firm millions a year since the issue remains unresolved. Okay, so if I'm clear on this one, the company hired OP as an auditor to come in and find issues, and then OP found the issues that led directly to the manager and the assistant doing shady stuff. And then the manager and the assistant fired OP so that they could continue to cover up all that shady stuff. It wasn't quite clear from the story, but that's kind of what I got from it. I'd love to know what you all got from it though, so if you're on YouTube or Spotify, drop a comment and let me know if I'm even in the right ballpark. This story comes to us from MD Lapla. Creepy Dean asks creepy request. IT complies. Around 2000-2001 in Argentina, I did a network admin course. The guy that taught the course was also an admin in a university. Let's call him IT professor. And he told us this story. The department of the university IT professor worked for dealt mostly with philosophy and philosophy-related careers, and it was around 95% female students, mostly high school graduates, but also a lot of people that, once retired, started the career as a hobby. In Argentina, university can be free of charge. In Argentina, IDs are numbered and sequential, so for instance, if an ID starts with 28 million, you can estimate what year that person was born in. There's only one caveat. Foreign-born people that have gained citizenship get a number that starts with something like 80 million. The dean, let's call him Creepy Dean, at that department was a 50 to 55-something-year-old dude with, you guessed it, a pretty creepy behavior. IT professor could access browsing history of every single person in the department, and let's just say his wasn't pretty, nor university related. Creepy Dean taught a couple of mid-career courses. He was one of several professors that taught this course. Every year, each university assigns the students to the courses they ask for and divide them between all available professors. Sometimes this is done by hand. Sometimes it's randomized somehow. This is handled by each department. In this case, it was done by a computer program that randomized everything, so each course had a wide array of different students. This program was something that IT professor created, because, prior to that, this was done manually. One day, Creepy Dean calls IT professor and tells him, I want, in my courses, just female students, with IDs starting at 35 million or more. Get it done. And remarked to IT professor that his job was on the line if he didn't comply. Since 95% of the students were female, this was a creepy request, but Creepy Dean knew that it wouldn't be as notorious. He could always blame it on chance, and at that time, this behavior was not something that could have gotten Creepy Dean fired. But the university board members wouldn't be too happy about this behavior either. IT professor understood that 35 million or more on the ID was for people that were roughly 21 to 22 years old or younger. Creepy Dean wanted some eye candy, and who knows what else. But Creepy Dean just said, female 35 million or more. So, IT Professor complied. He assigned all foreign female students with IDs starting 80 million and all older than 65 to Creepy Dean courses. Creepy Dean was furious the first day of classes. He wanted IT Professor fired. IT Professor told him, "I've complied with your request, even though it was weird and something that I'm sure the board members wouldn't be too happy to find out about." IT Professor told us Creepy Dean got dishonorably discharged as dean a couple months after this story. There were some speculations, but he never found out exactly why. Jumping down to the comments on this one, there's one from a user called BlueMoon219. It says, "It's not the main point here, but taking a philosophy course filled only with other older women who've immigrated from all over the world sounds like an awesome time. Morals are easy to talk about when you're young and know everything but have done nothing. But when you've done things, been places, moved to a foreign country, had and maybe lost friends, family, jobs, houses, money, and various things that are worth keeping safe, that's when the conversations are less about having to introduce the concept of shades of gray to students and can get right into the deep end. Also, there's no way that at least a bunch of the ladies didn't end up with friends there, and I'd say a 99% chance that at least once, someone brought in homemade snacks." OP responded and said, "Also, since they're all older ladies doing it as a hobby, I guess that they'll have a real passion for it." Can we just focus for one moment that this creepy professor wanted all young females in his class, and he was going to have IT Professor fired if they didn't comply? Wow, that would have been something that IT Professor should have reported immediately to the people higher up. This must be something that Creepy Dean was able to do in the past, and so they were just asking for it to be done again this year. And then there's the fact that IT Professor was able to see all the creepy search results from what the Creepy Dean was doing. Oh man, there's just a lot of stuff here that should have been reported and probably wasn't, because I think IT Professor just wanted to keep their job. This story comes to us from Lil Diddy02. "Okay, let's call the park officer. This happened July 4th weekend. I am a member and have a place in a self-contained camp community. Nice quiet place with a lake and pools and a restaurant and things like that. I love it because my kid can be a kid like I was and go wander with friends and disappear until dinner time, and I don't have to worry. Our place is on a small cul-de-sac that is grassed in, and we use it for kids to play and set up cornhole and all that. Because it's July 4th, a bunch of people have guests, so the park is more full than normal, and a guest of someone on the circle parked at the edge of the grass. Well, my kid and another kid were playing catch, and one of the kids missed the ball and it hit the park car. Owner of the car comes out hot and is going at the kids. Me and the other kid's parents both go over to calm the situation. Obviously, if there's damage, we'll take care of it because it's from our kids. But this guy starts going off about all these dents and this big scratch and a crack in the windshield, and all this is the kid's fault. I was willing to be reasonable, but when you start saying you want a ton of extra work done, trying to blame my kid, I get a little less reasonable. So we're going back and forth, and then he says the magic word that if we aren't willing to pay for everything, he's going to call the park safety office to come deal with it. Knowing where this was going, I smiled and said, yes, okay, let's do that. So the officer comes out, and to no one's surprise but this guy, the area his car is parked in is a no parking area. So not only does the officer tell him to deal with it, because if he had followed the rules and parked in an actual parking zone, this wouldn't have happened. And because the guy told him he'd been parked there for 2 days with no issues before now, he got a nice fat ticket and order to remove his car. He turned bright red but didn't say another word and moved his car. And we didn't see or hear from him for the rest of the weekend. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called SFredette. It says, "It was only after I'd moved to the US and had a couple of awkward conversations that I realized that cornhole is actually a game and not just a polite euphemism for buggery." Alright, I had to read that comment because it was probably the best one. out of all the comments down below this one. But let's just take a quick look at this one from a step back. These are kids playing in an area where kids normally play, and the person parked there probably being able to see the kids that were playing in that area, and in a no parking zone at that. This is completely on that person. OP was going to be nice about it. They were going to pay for the damage, and that person came in hot and heavy. As soon as somebody comes at you hot and heavy when you're trying to give them an inch, just cut that off. They don't deserve it. This story comes to us from Emotional Pain 9466, Unlimited PTO. The company I worked for converted some execs from having set PTO to unlimited, and also wiped out their PTO bank. Mine, personally, was worth 40 grand the day I would leave. I could never take enough PTO in the past, just didn't need it. Needless to say, I was pissed. We were told that this was a recruiting tool. You don't have to record your time off or ask permission. I asked, does that mean we can take 30 or 60 days like a mini sabbatical? Oh no, HR lady says, culturally, we don't do that. Then what does unlimited PTO mean? No definition given. So I made up my own rules. I now work 9 to 3, lunch if I care to, Fridays are completely blocked off, and 3 2-week vacations set off on my calendar. I know what you're going to say. Why don't you maximize your PTO before? Because I actually enjoyed my work. I had a sense of satisfaction. With this and other benefit reductions and promotion of figurehead leadership, the place lost its soul. My own supervisory leadership constantly gaslighting and whose own lack of ability has just become untenable. So, the PTO decision was the linchpin. I work 1/3 less time and still pull in the same wage. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called How to Retire by 40. I missed that boat. It says, I would talk to an employment lawyer. I don't think they'd be able to magically wipe away $40,000 in unpaid PTO by announcing it's now unlimited. They should either allow you to use it or pay you out. OP responded and said, probably could have. I'm close enough to the C-suite, I don't want to be a target. The value of my wage is more important than that PTO bank. It's the way they did it. They actually asked for our opinion on it, and everyone told them bad idea, and they still did it. Learned later that the PTO bank they wiped out company-wide allowed them to unwind a couple million of accrued liabilities, giving a short-term bump to profit. Yeah, if I were OP, I would be on the phone with an employment lawyer immediately on this one because they just took away 40 grand of your money. This was supposed to go to you at retirement. And what's to say that next year they just don't say, oh, we're going to go back to the old system now and then start you back at zero and you just don't get that money back. There's literally nothing stopping them from doing that. OP, you got screwed. And not only that, but you kind of provided them the lube by not doing anything about it. This story comes to us from Reaper Canadian. Why are you wearing a white hat? You're not a supervisor. So this story happened around 2003 or 2004. I was in the military working for a new boss who was afraid to look incompetent. I understand his position, but the equipment we were working on isn't used anywhere else in the world, so there's no reason he should have been self-conscious about it. Literally, everybody posted into this job is starting from ignorance of the kit in question. For your knowledge, we are technicians. Our job is fixing electronics and performing third-line maintenance. Board level, replacing components on equipment. The equipment we were working on are 1.5 metric ton cameras used to acquire telemetry information from our aircraft on bombing ranges. They're really, really old though, like they were installed in the late 60s. Due to this, we needed to start trialing a new system. So the government opened up contracts and a bid was won. We were finally going to get upgrades. At this point, I was an expert on the systems. Our boss went on a leadership course required when you reach his rank, and he dumped everything he had on his plate onto the lap of his second in command, who was understandably frustrated. I offered to take on the biggest project so there would be less to do, and because I wanted to show I had the skills, he agreed. So I contacted all of the necessary people, PMed, supply, engineers, and transport, in order to orchestrate the removal and disposal of these cameras. After 2 weeks of careful planning and research, we were ready to go. The 2IC grinned at me on the day of the move and says, "Grab the white hat, this is your project, you're in charge here." Beaming with pride, I grab the site supervisor hard hat, throw it on, and start the ball rolling. Everything is going well and according to plan. The dome housing the camera has been cut off, and the truck with crane arm, capable of lifting up to a metric ton, is on site. I am about to go dismantle the camera. They're capable of being split into 3 pieces, all weighing under a ton each, when my boss gets out to the range. It's his first day back at work after his course, qualifying him to be a leader for his troops. Instead of asking for a brief as to what's happening or just letting it play out, he decides to puff out his chest and display his newfound levels of authority and command. Loudly, in front of everybody, he says, "Why the F are you wearing a white hat? You aren't the Master Corporal." Turning red with embarrassment and not having much of a spine back then, I capitulate and apologize, attempting to stammer out that I was assigned this task. He cuts me off. "Whatever, take it off and get back to work." He exchanges hard hats with me, and I'm wearing my yellow worker hat now. He's wearing the white site supervisor hat. Smugly content, he turns to me and says, "Carry on." Here's the malicious compliance bit. I'm the one who did all of the work. I know exactly what needs to be done next. As the person with all of the information, the reason I was supervising it should be obvious. So I decided it was time for some malicious compliance. He wanted to embarrass me in front of everybody. Turnabout is fair play, my friend. I nodded and said, "No problem, boss. What do you want me to do?" He said, "Keep removing the camera." I'd love to. How do I do that? My vapid response came back. "As you are the site supervisor, I'm awaiting your instructions on how to proceed. What exactly would you like me to do next, boss?" He turned beet red as he realized this means he would have to publicly state that he, in effect, chewed me out for supervising the project I put together, as I should have been doing. He swore at me a bit and waved his hand saying, "Just finish the job," turning more red by the minute as higher ranking people caught on to what had just happened. So they started clustering around him, asking pointed questions about the project and process. The absolute glee I felt when the range chief asked him where we were bringing the cameras, and the look on his face as he realized he was going to have to call me over to answer the questions was priceless. But not as priceless as the malicious gleam I caught in the chief's eye when he turned to me. It said, "I understand. I've got your back." This guy just made it completely obvious that when you go to a course and they give you a piece of paper stating that you've completed the course, you don't necessarily actually learn anything. I think the only thing that could have been better on this one would have been if the range chief walked up to Master Corporal, took the white hat off of his head, and handed it back to OP. That would have been absolutely wonderful. Alright, OP updated this one a couple of times with a couple of extra posts down in the comments. Here is the first one. It says, "Because a couple of people asked for more about this guy, I'll post a second story. And yes, there are more than this." So this is the same guy from that story. I'm just a lowly corporal and he's my supervisor. The year is either 2003 or 2004. It was a long time ago, but it was definitely one of those two, and it's summer. The equipment we work on are called theodolites. They're big ride-on cameras that weigh 1,440 kilograms. They weigh around 3,168 pounds each. They're housed in fiberglass domes that protect them from the elements, and they're used for data acquisition with respect to air weapon systems. My buddy and I are working on a dome controller, which is basically just a motor that's synchronized to the servos inside the camera, so that when the camera turns, the dome turns with it, so the camera can keep pointing out the opening at the aircraft. We've been working at this particular dome controller for a couple of hours, and we think we have the fault narrowed down. Enter my new boss on his first day of the job. He strolls in the door of the shop, which is right beside where my buddy and I are working. He introduces himself to us and asks what we're working on. I fill him in, letting him know that it's a dome controller, which is why it's over by the door, the only place in the shop we had 3-phase power. I explain it briefly, and he nods sagely before confidently stating, "I'm pretty sure it's just your current limiter." Now, this is unique technology in that it's old from the late 60s, and much of it had been entirely replaced over the years as components were swapped out. It's altogether possible he's worked on something similar, but these are unique pieces of kit. I comment, the problem isn't the current, the problem is that it's lagging behind the synchros by about a second. I don't think the relay is engaging in time, which I think points to an issue in the timing circuits. Ignoring this, he says, I've got a ton of experience working on equipment like this, I know what I'm doing. Time for some malicious compliance. I comply and step back to let the professional at it. He doesn't even bother hooking up a multimeter, but instead starts turning pots randomly. A pot is a potentiometer, which for the non-tech savvy here means he's basically effing with the internal tuning of the system. Potentiometers are variable resistors that control how much current is flowing through a system. Dimmer switches are an example of them in action. Now imagine somebody just started randomly turning several of them inside a system that deals with high current moving hundreds of pounds of fiberglass, and then picture what happened when he turned it on to see what would happen. The main transformer caught on fire from the current overload. It was a 13-lead transformer that was basically the brains of everything happening in the controller. And the best part, the company that made it went out of business 3 years before I was even born. When the sergeant asked us what the heck had happened, I pointed out that his newly promoted Master Corporal had decided to show us how to repair something we were already experts at by setting it on fire. We had to custom order a 13-lead transformer from a company, and the Master Corporal never touched my equipment again. There is one more malicious compliance story about this guy. I'll post that one a little bit later when I have some time. I'm off to lunch. In the comments for this update, we have one from a user called Nobody Noticed Me. It says, seems you've had a number of bosses that haven't figured out the first lesson of command. Find out who the heck actually knows what they're doing and ask them to get it done. And if you're smart, watch and learn. And if you're stupid, just tell them to report back when it's ready. OP responded and said, no, that was the same guy over and over again. My other bosses weren't incompetent. One of them was lazy when it came to doing cleanup, but that's about it. Now, further down in the comments for this update, there was somebody who decided to challenge OP on their knowledge of electrical stuff, and OP absolutely destroyed them in the comments. It's so long, it would probably take half an hour just to read that comment exchange, but I just want to let you know for more context that OP definitely knows what they're talking about, and for anything electrical, I would absolutely defer to them and their knowledge. Alright, so we're gonna get into OP's part 3 right now, and the really fun part about part 3 for me is that OP was stationed in the town that I live in. Really cool. So this one says, so this time I'm talking about a boss I had in 2011. I'm stationed in Trenton, Ontario this time, and I'm working on a system called the MPN-25, which is a mobile radar system which can be deployed, set up, and fully functional. At least on paper, the reality is a little different, but that's tech stuff, anywhere in the world in under 48 hours. You're going to need to understand two things to understand this story. First, PAR means Precision Approach Radar, and it is in reference to the elevation of an aircraft. There are a lot of these little things called TR, Transmit Receive modules, in the PAR array, which interpret the radio wave the radar sends out so that it can tell how high an aircraft is. And by a lot, I mean somewhere in the range of 110 plus. I can't remember the exact number. The second thing you need to know about this radar is that the PAR array isn't a moving part. It uses beams to register the target, so the TR modules are absolutely critical in determining where the aircraft is in relation to the ground. Okay, now that's out of the way. We had an issue with some of the TR modules near the bottom of the PAR array, and when one of those modules dies, it tends to pull down the gain in the other modules around it. So troubleshooting to find out which module is the problem can be problematic. Or so I was taught. We're going to come back to this. This boss had given me a speech when I arrived at the unit that the radar I was working on would take a year to get comfortable on before I knew what I was doing. Also, the radar is under warranty, so all we can do is pull boxes, no third line maintenance. As a qualified third line tech, box level fault finding is a joke. especially considering this is a giant radio and I just came from a place where I was the radio subject matter expert. I responded with, "I'm looking forward to it, boss. You should know that I'm an expert in radios though, so you'll be able to employ me on the radar much faster than that." His response stunned me. Radars have nothing to do with radios. For the record, radar is an acronym. It stands for Radio Detection and Ranging. So I'm brand new to the unit, and my supervisor doesn't understand the principles behind radar. Great. So remember the TR module problem? I realized my boss isn't going to be able to impart anything useful to me, so I start reading the radar books. Nothing new to learn here outside the software, since radars are essentially schizophrenic radios that are constantly screaming, "What the F was that?" every single time it detects something in its sweep. I've read the manuals. I have some grounds for troubleshooting. I start by running what's called a max power calibration. All this does is run each TR module to load limit, and it shows you what kind of power they put out. Anything around, if I recall correctly, 100 decibels was considered good. Usually, when a module busts, the final amplifier stage is the culprit, and you'd see a return on max power calibrations that topped out around 60 to 80 decibels. That was the sign the module needed to be replaced. I had gotten to work and was about to extract the 5 bad modules we had in the array when that boss comes strolling in. Now, in the PAR array, there's over 100 of these little modules. Controlling each cluster of modules is an interface card, 5 total, connecting in series and in parallel, and it's responsible for like 23 or 24 modules each. I suspect the problem with these modules is actually the interface card, because even though I've replaced the TR modules, the fault is persistent. Again, I've already run a max power calibration. My boss suggests that I remove the connectors between the interface cards because if I don't, I'll blow up every TR module connected to the array. I disagree because the manuals indicated that removing the ribbon cables also removes the alternate grounding paths, and an NS interface card will do exactly what he's saying if it already has a bad ground and no redundancy. He looks at me pointedly with that look parents give unruly kids and said, "I've been here for 4 years. You need to remove the ribbon cables connecting to the interface cards. Don't argue with me." Finally, we're on to malicious compliance time. "Alright boss, your call. You're the supervisor. Would you mind being the one to run the cal? I'm not comfortable doing something I think will destroy the array," I responded. "Sure," he snapped out, confident in his knowledge, "but be ready to apologize when you're wrong." He runs a max power calibration with the interface cards not linked. Lo and behold, the bottom 20-something TR modules link to IC5 fry. Reportedly, these cost around $11,000 each, making this fault somewhere in the $250,000 range. He left the radar building so I could fix the fried array, and about an hour later, the PAR array was up and running, with over half of our spare modules used to repair it. Jumping down to the comments on this update, we have one from a user called the True Dr. Pepper. It says, "How did he survive so many expensive screw-ups?" OP responded and said, "The same way every Master Corporal does, by relying on corporals to fix their F-ups and make them look good. Master Corporal in the Canadian Forces is basically a rank that likes to pretend they don't need to work on things. Good Master Corporals understand that their job is basically training others to replace them for when they get promoted to Sergeant, and it's to act as a shield between senior leadership and the workforce, middle management, if you will. Not a lot understand this, and it varies by trade in the military. A Master Corporal in the infantry has vastly different responsibilities than a Master Corporal in the ATIS trade. You know all those stories you see on the news about military defense budgets being so high? Stories like this are a good part of the reason why that budget needs to be so high. So, I was never in the military myself, but I've learned a lot from these stories and the fact that I live in the town with Canada's largest Air Force base. I believe that if I were in the military, I would have a wonderful career if I just kept my mouth shut and did what I was told by the people above me. It sounds like you absolutely can't get discharged from the military if you just do what you're told. Alright, OP has one more story and it's kinda related but kinda not. It's titled, "Can you hurry up please? I'd like to go home." So this story happened at my first posting again, Cold Lake, Alberta. Except this time it wasn't the boss from the other post, but rather my first boss ever in the forces. Friday cleanups involve sweeping, mopping, lunch, then wash the vehicles and drive back to base. Unless it was crappy weather, then we wash the vehicles at base. So we're on to a regular Friday in the summer of 2002, and everybody except me, my boss, and the other two master corporals are out at the range in the shop. Why so many supervisors for just one guy? We had a mission that morning, so we needed 2 teams on the ground. Our master corporal from the telemetry section came out to assist. After the mission was over, we broke for an early lunch and prepared for cleanup. Now, I was expecting that since I was the only private there, I hadn't been promoted to corporal yet, the master corporals would grab some brooms and mops and help out. Instead, they all sat around talking. No biggie, we all have to pay our dues, right? If they're not in a hurry, then I'll do it all. And I don't even feel bad, like I'm being singled out, because nobody else is here. That is, of course, until my boss glances at his watch and makes the offhand remark, "Hey buddy, you gonna be at this all day? We need these floors mopped before we can get out of here. You know the rules." I pointedly looked at the 3 mops to their right, my left, just sitting there untouched, while I'm mopping a bay large enough to drive 2 vehicles in side by side, which also houses a giant camera you can sit on and swivel around. I'm looking at probably 45 minutes worth of mopping minimum. I didn't even return a snide remark. I simply said, "Yes, Master Corporal," and proceeded to painstakingly mop every single inch of the floor, changing the water out every time it turned gray, like every 2 minutes, to ensure I did a thorough and complete job. It took just over 90 minutes to complete, and we hadn't even gotten down to washing the vehicles, which they could have done in the vehicle bay while waiting. The best part was that my boss, who spent the ride back berating me for how slow I was being, reacting to me, reminding him we still needed to wash both trucks. Being the only private, this dawned on him that I was likely going to take us to well after 4 that afternoon if he left me to it. He was right, I would have made those vehicles sparkle with my attention to detail, and decided to show me how to do it quickly after that. In short, this guy wanted to get out for the weekend at noon, but due to his own laziness and sense of entitlement, ended up leaving shortly after 3. We were still off early, but about 3 hours later than he was planning. Minor revenge, but as a private, I was willing to take what I could get. Jumping to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called PN Gwyn. It says, "I like the way you tell these stories. Also, 2 thumbs up for doing exactly what you were told to do and messing with your supervisors by simply following orders." I find it quite interesting that in a ton of the military stories that we see on Reddit, whether it's from the US or Canada or basically anywhere else in the world, is that they're constantly working with systems that are like 60 years old. I know there's a bunch of new technology out there as well that's bloody expensive, but it does seem to me like most of the militaries in the world are working on technology from way back when, and it's still working, as long as the people there know how to fix it. This story comes to us from Trash LeBlanc. Coworkers and management got what they asked for because it's in the agreement. I'm actually excited to be able to contribute here for once. This is currently taking place in a casino in a province in Canada I work at, and it is a bit multifaceted. To start, we're technically government employees. Don't ask me why, but we're also union. Yeah, I'm a literal bartender in a restaurant where everyone is a unionized government employee. You can see where this is probably going, or what kind of environment this has engendered. So, first off, employees. There are 3 full-time bartenders. As a person who has bartended or managed bars off and on for decades, I can say we actually get hosed. Like, I've never made so little money working in the service industry, but we have a pension and benefits, so that's pretty choice. We consistently work our butts off while we watch our floor counting their hundreds of dollars at the end of a shift, while we only make what happens directly at our bar. The servers are mandated to tip out 2% of drink sales only. Regularly, they ignorantly throw dimes across the table at us and make comments about, "Oh, it was only 50 cents, but I rounded up to $1 because you earned it." Yes, comments like this happen on the regular. The rub is because of the CBA with the union, bartenders are not allowed to serve tables, and the servers consistently remind us of this. Here is where it gets bad. They expect the bartenders to also run their food, clean and clear their tables, and still only tip to the literal penny. This is one aspect. Now, as for management, we have numerous times had conversations with management as our servers constantly abandon their tables. They go outside to smoke, hang out on their phones, and generally do the barest of minimums. But because they are not on the floor, we have to be. We are mandated and guaranteed 15-minute breaks twice a shift, and one 30-minute which we never get. This is without mentioning ones that management refuses to hire any new bartenders due to budgetary constraints. We've spoken to management numerous times, and all we get told is that the servers have the floor and that we can file a grievance with the union. Cue Malicious Compliance, and it's good. So myself and the other two bartenders sat down with our union reps and hammered out the exact parameters of our jobs, management duties and obligations, and that of our floor. We got everything highlighted, and we now have laminated cardstock behind the bar with the printed and highlighted aspects of our job parameters, and our job guarantees. A few weeks ago, we three started every shift the same way. Servers would regularly just walk behind the bar to get drinks for themselves or their clients. Sorry, you're not bartenders. You can't come behind the bar. What? Yeah, sorry, it's in the CBA. We can't take tables and you can't serve drinks. We'll get to it as soon as we can. Servers now have to wait on us to pour their drinks, pop, water, beer, or even get them ice. That's step one. We now officially take our 15s and our 30-minute breaks. As such, any and all drink service stops. Here's the best part. Because of this, management, who is otherwise completely useless, chatting with friends or hiding in their offices, now has no choice but to come down and man the bar while we're on break. They have to make drinks, stock the bar, which we make sure needs stocking, and put away and polish our glassware. This is important as we have very specific criteria for our house drinks and the types of vessels they're served in. It's been amusing to watch, but we enjoy our breaks, and I'm catching up on some reading. It's only been a few weeks, but the servers seem to be getting it, and all of a sudden, there are 2 new bartenders in training on the schedule, and 2 more apparently being hired. Maybe this malicious compliance stuff does work. OP added on at the bottom, it says edit/update. So I need to fill in some gaps here from the comments section. Management runs on a P&L bonus structure. For those who don't know, that's profit and loss. The less they spend while maintaining a baseline of profitability, the more money they make. This means we regularly run out of glassware, etc. It's also why we are frequently short-staffed. Management is very questionable at this job. I have been a bar manager at 3 different locations in the past, 2 nightclubs and a speakeasy, and watching my bar run out of things like triple sec, garnish, and vodka, yes, really, is beyond insane to me. Upper management has a very weird nepotism feel to it. Every manager below the GM is a former coworker or friend of the GM from other locations they've worked at, drinking buddies, and generally people with no actual experience in the field. The reviews of this place are atrocious. The only good ones seen recently are fake reviews written by the supervisors and managers under fake names, or they come directly from bar service interactions. I don't mean to dump on the floor or servers, they do hard work, but the bar is the only staff ever on the floor from open to close, and we're the first point of contact at the door since we regularly don't have a host or a hostess. To add, our oldest bartender has been here 7 years and is around 60 years old. He holds or has held a supervisor position and has been the first and last point of contact for a lot of clients and regulars. We have very similar mindsets and frequently leave the bar to address issues and try to correct them, well beyond our scope of duties, which is why the bartenders here are seen so favorably. Again, the floor does work their butts off. I've never been an us versus them person. No serving position is easy, but this venue has floor staff full of people who regularly walk off for smoke breaks, sit in the back on their phones, and generally ignore their clients. Because of the nature of the business, the floor on slow nights will still make $150 regardless of the quality of service. So they're not the most motivated. Case in point, one table just last night waited almost 20 minutes just to pay their bill because their server was outside smoking and on their phone. This is my first unionized position in the service industry, and in the province of BC, Canada, it's governed by the BCGEU, the BC General Employees Union. I've never been in a position like this, and while being the newest person, it took some time to rope in the other two long-term bartenders to actually do something about the working conditions. All of our new hires behind the bar will be notified of their rights and will not be fed to the wolves. It's not how I or we operate. If the job sucks, it's time to dip. Yes, this is a stop in my life that is currently necessary. I own a business, but I have a kid, and this job offers me a pension and quality employer-paid benefits. I've got 2 years of school left, and while I'm in my early 40s, having that stability for myself and my kid, while having their braces and my vision and prescriptions covered, is a nice little safety net. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called IsGrimner. It says, management filling in for labor? Don't know how the unions work up there, but I have a family member who was management and received a grievance because he tried to help get a stuck panel off a vehicle. OP responded and said, our CBA is very clear in that if the coded employee for that department is unavailable, management must fill the role. It's been a fun watch over the last few weeks. So if I was a bartender and I was only getting 2% of the tips from drink sales, I would not be out there cleaning the tables and running food, because that's just not part of my job, and you're not paying me enough to do it. And also, what's this about them all being on break at the same time? If you have 3 full-time bartenders that are there 5 days a week, that means you have multiple people on at a time. Why didn't they stagger the breaks? What was up with that? Management in this place just sounds incredibly stupid. One more thing to touch on this one is that they're bringing in 2 more bartenders and they have 2 more on the way after that. It sounds to me like OP is getting replaced, but with the union, I'm not sure how that would work. Maybe they're just going to cut down hours and OP will be forced to leave that way. This story comes to us from King of Mooks. CEO's assistant said it wasn't right I had a nicer chair than he did. Very mild one, bit wordy, with a not particularly satisfying payoff. A while back, my wife and I were buying our house after a few years of rental. There was a delay in the new housing being ready, so we moved in with my mother for a few weeks. During that time, I stashed some stuff at work, including bringing in my chair, a very nice Herman Miller Aeron that I had gotten secondhand. The office chairs were old, standard, serviceable, but not exactly nice. After a few days, I noticed that my chair would be in the conference room every morning. No problem, I just wheeled it back to my desk. I was working 8 to 4 to avoid traffic, so was usually in first. The CEO of about 120 people would usually not arrive until about noon, and take later meetings when most of the staff were away. After a few days, the chair kept ending up at his desk. Open plan, thankfully, so I just took it back every morning. I wasn't foolish enough to go into the CEO's office. He'd shoot me a dirty look every morning, but that was it. After a few more days of this back and forward, the CEO's assistant, who was a lovely person who I felt immense pity for, approached me and told me that the CEO didn't think it was appropriate that I had a nicer chair than him. People would think that my desk belonged to the CEO, and it was stressing her out having to basically fight for it every day on his behalf. I told her I understood completely and would stop fighting over it. I took it out of the office that lunchtime and reclaimed a normal office chair. The next day she came over and asked me where the chair was. I said with an incredibly straight face that I thought since it wasn't appropriate, I just took it to my car. She had a super stunned look, but just kinda ran off. Since I was almost always first in, I always got parking near the building. Pretty much everyone got to walk past my car on the way into the office and see my chair in the boot for a few more weeks. However, given his cowardly nature, I never got approached about it again. To this day, I'm 100% certain they thought I was just going to give in and let him have my chair. Instead, I got the joy of telling everyone the honest truth about why my chair was in my car for weeks. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Haddix. It says, if the guy had any sense, He'd have just done what my old IT director did. Hey, why is your chair so much better than everyone else's? I brought it in from home. It's mine. Cool, good choice. Next day, he had a $980 office chair delivered. Okay, for this story, can we just acknowledge that the CEO didn't think that OP's chair was good enough for OP, and so they kept on stealing it for themselves? Like, they darn well knew that that was OP's chair that OP had brought in, and they just took it every day, and they were expecting OP to give it to them. Can you say entitled? I think on the second day of my chair going missing and then finding it at the CEO's desk, I'd go have a chat with HR, the ones who said I was allowed to bring this chair in the first place, and let them know what's happening. Let them have that discussion with the CEO to keep their grubby hands off of OP's really nice chair. This story comes to us from Ancient Educator 76. The dude eventually abides. I'm working in the deli in Scottsdale, Arizona, where the customers are weird and the employees are non-existent. It's a busy day because of this fact. A customer comes up with his hands on his hips like Superman. You know that way that customers try to let you know they've been waiting a long, any amount of time? Some do the I'm a little teapot with one hand on hip, some cross their arms, not this guy. He acts like he walked into the second half of a Hims commercial, minus the smile. I eventually get to him among the sea of tasks and other customers on the other side of the deli, and he huffs. Why do you only have 3 spicy strips left? You guys ain't prepared at all. And he puffs, how are you the only person here? Which was more accusatory than the remorseful or showing pity, etc. And he just about blows my patience in when I realize that by the time I've rung up and weighted out his chicken strips, that I hit the wrong tear weight, significantly affecting the price. I figured, whatever, I'm only losing $4. Honestly, I'd pay twice that just to have this interaction over with. Before I can say anything, Shirley Temple, sassy Superman, literally spits out, that's the wrong price, dude. How about you reweigh it the right way? You got it. Enter Malicious Compliance. I knew full well that when I reweighed it and properly did the correct tear weight, it was going to be a bigger price. I accidentally hit 0.4 for tear weight, not 0.005. It made the chicken $7 more by the time the tag printed out. He was not happy. What the heck? The price was $5.99 on sale and you had it at $7. There's no way. No effing way. I explained to him that I originally did make a mistake, but I accidentally hit a large tear weight that made your chicken significantly cheaper, but this is the correct sale price now. Sorry for the mix-up. He crumpled back into the sea of demanding customers who all seemed fairly entertained. Who am I kidding? Half the people didn't even notice. But for me, it was a great moment and an otherwise brutal day so far. I absolutely love all of the stories on Reddit from Ancient Educator 76. They've got a ton of them out there from their time as a teacher, their time in the deli, and I believe in other jobs as well. If you have a chance, I recommend going onto there, checking out their profile, and read a bunch of their stories. We've covered a ton of them on here, and they are absolutely worth your time. This story comes to us from Ginjas in Paris. You want me to participate in the weekly all hands? No problem. I just saw an article about Mercedes-Benz allowing Teams calls with a camera to their vehicles, and it reminded me of this situation. Several years ago, I worked for a small solar company that was acquired by what is essentially the Walmart of solar. We went from weekly in-person meetings on a schedule that worked for both management and staff to daily check-ins, weekly department calls, and other unnecessary regional calls and meetings. What was initially 2 to 3 short meetings per week turned into around 10 45-minute to an hour meetings per week. My responsibilities were about 20% in-office, 80% field work. Some of the locations I needed to get to were an hour plus away, and a lot of times, I was crunched to get to 5 to 6 locations within the workday. For as long as I could, I would either skip a call if I was in the field, or I would listen and not participate, so I was on the call, but could still take care of whatever tasks I needed to. I ended up getting reprimanded and told to just park and take the calls, but I needed to participate in all of them or I would be written up. So that's what I did. If a call was happening, I would find the closest parking lot, take the call, and participate. This company also scrutinized overtime and hours, so we couldn't work overtime without approval. This meant if I didn't get something done, I would just head back to the office and reschedule it for the following day. My coworkers did the same, and our productivity dropped overall by about 60%. Within a month, our regional manager was in our office asking us WTF was going on, and we told her directly that we have a large region to cover and most of these calls are nonsense corporate feel-good BS. If they wanted productivity where it was before, they needed to cut the meetings, because meetings don't improve metrics. Actually being able to work does. They did cut our meetings, but it turned into a crap show when the big company fully took over. That office is now officially closed because while we had the second best metrics in the entire company, we were tired of the BS and we all quit, and they could not replicate our quality or quantity of installations in that office. Well, I don't know on this one, but I think that they should schedule a meeting to go over how many meetings they're having and decide if these meetings actually need to be meted, right? This story comes to us from El Firo. Don't want to pay me for being on call? Okay, I won't be. Hey there, just wanted to share my story of malicious compliance. It's been a few years, but I'm still proud of it. I worked in IT at a medium-sized company. Our department had around 20 people, and each area had 2 specialists. For example, we had 2 people for servers and databases, and I was one of the 2 responsible for networks and firewalls. Due to laws in our country, no one could be forced to be on call 24/7. However, the company needed people to be available around the clock, so they offered a workaround, a gentleman's agreement. We were each paid around 500 euros per month to be on call, but with relaxed expectations. We didn't need to answer immediately, just return calls within a reasonable time frame, and we weren't expected to jump into action right away. Since calls were rare, maybe 2 or 3 per team per year, it was easy money for just a little mental burden. The problem: I was the new guy. I worked there for a couple years, and for some reason, my boss left me out of the on-call rotation and the 500 euro monthly bonus. At first, I didn't mind. I wasn't experienced enough to help quickly, and I wasn't being called anyway. But after 2 years, my upper manager said, right in front of other colleagues and my direct boss, "If there's a problem, we'll just call him," referring to me when my partner was on vacation or sick leave. The first incident. Naturally, I was pissed. And wouldn't you know it, soon after, there was a major system issue, and the whole department was needed. Instead of calling me himself, the upper manager had another colleague make the call. I answered, but I refused to help. It was hard to say no, knowing it would cause extra work for others, but I stood firm. The solution. After being put in such a position, I decided to take matters into my own hands. If they didn't want me officially on call, then they wouldn't be able to call me at all. I changed my mobile number and gave the new one only to my direct partner, who agreed with me that the situation was unfair. He even said he'd pretend to not have my number if asked. Everyone knew I was angry, and they respected my stance. I unplugged my home phone, which I didn't use anyway, and gave HR my parents' number. I told my parents only to contact me if it was an emergency, not for anything just work-related. Then I waited. The crash and aftermath. Eventually, my moment came. My colleague was on vacation overseas, and I had a relaxing weekend. On Monday, I came into work to find chaos. Everything had crashed. The firewall, the main network gateway, had a hardware issue with one of the interfaces constantly dropping in and out. Only my colleague and I had login access to fix it. With neither of us reachable, the company had to call in external support, which cost them the entire weekend to resolve. As a result, some critical calculations didn't run on time. I was immediately called into my boss's office, not the upper manager, of course. He told me I was being added to the on-call rotation, effective immediately. HR and upper management paperwork would follow. He just needed me reachable before I left the building that day. So I handed over my new number. From that day forward, I was never left out again. Bonus, other departments were always bitter about our easy money for on-call duty. I was the only one who openly said I'd give up the extra pay if I could just have my personal freedom back. Eventually, I did exactly that. I left the company for a 9-to-5 job. No more worrying that my phone might ring at any moment. The extra 3,000 euros a year might sound appealing, but to me, it wasn't worth the constant mental load. I hope you enjoyed my malicious compliance. Take care. Okay, I really agree with OP on this one at the end because when you are on call, it does take a mental toll on you completely. When I was doing the tow truck job, we worked 48 or 72-hour shifts. So you'd get to come home and sleep, maybe for a couple hours, until your tablet went off and you'd be expected to jump up right away and get back out on the truck and go pick up a car. Or rescue somebody who needed to get into their car because they locked themselves out at 3 o'clock in the morning. Dumbasses. It even sounds like OP's situation was a little bit easier than the one that I was in because they had a time frame to call back within and respond to the issue. For me, it was instant. Tablet goes off and you rush out the door to get to that job. OP said in a comment down below that they would go to a movie, check their phone before the movie, and check their phone after the movie. If I'd done that, I would have been fired. Anyway, I totally turned the comments in this one to completely about me and not about OP, so let's just move on from this one. This story comes to us from Brittany Rousba. He came for a refund, so I gave him one. Years ago, when 2-year cell phone contracts were still a thing, and you had to pay per text message, I worked at a Sprint store in a busy area in Michigan. We weren't a corporate store, which meant we didn't have access to billing or refunds. We were more there for repairs and sales. One day, this man comes in fuming about being charged 20 cents for a text that allegedly Sprint had sent. Probably a bill reminder, but I don't believe you were charged for text from the company. Anywho, I explained to the man that we aren't a corporate store, so I wouldn't even be able to access the bill to refund. And that was just unacceptable, and he starts screaming. Starts drilling into me about how I'm just a dumb kid, and people my age may love to text, but he's never going to, and how it's unfair he has to pay this charge. I had just went to the corner store for a snack and paid cash, and I just threw my change in my pocket. I reached into my pocket, smiled at him, and pulled out a quarter. I said, "Here you go, with interest." I felt like a goddess. It was so petty and in his face, priceless. This isn't the point. He slammed the quarter down and left. I hope he's having the day he deserves. Does anybody else here feel like OP missed a completely obvious opportunity? Actually, then again, maybe OP's too young to remember this one. But if you're gonna flip a quarter over to somebody who's older, you tell them, "Here's a quarter, call someone who cares." It's a sad realization moment for me that there are people out there that probably don't know what a payphone is. Oh no. This story comes to us from Downtown Physics 8853, Time Clock Compliance. I work at a manufacturing company. The closest time clock to the employee parking lot is down in the machine shop. And every day, about 24 people can be seen standing around the clock, waiting for it to click over to 3:30, and then they can punch out. But about a year ago, we got a new general manager. After she had been there for a couple months, she decided that this should not be allowed, and a notice was posted stating that people may not congregate around the time clock anymore. At about the same time, there was a corporate-wide exercise campaign based around the Olympics, and many people downloaded an exercise app that tracked their daily steps, along with other things, for possible prizes and locational honors. Now, the downstairs machine shop is a large, open, roughly square space with a marked aisle running around the periphery of the floor. So when the time clock edict came around, people still headed to the clock, but instead spent the time getting their daily steps in. By the end of the week, we had about 30 people spending the last 5 to 10 minutes of the shift circumambulating clockwise around the entire machining department, checking the clock each time they passed. After the GM saw this spectacle one day, I guess it reminded her too much of that scene in Midnight Express, and she reversed the clock edict. Funny thing though, people still kept coming down to get their steps in for a few weeks afterward until the contest was over. I want to say thank you to OP for teaching me a new word today, circumambulate, and I was trying to decide how I'd be able to use that in a sentence, but I don't know, I kind of feel like I'd be walking in circles before I'd get the chance to use it. I love how OP and the other coworkers made their own version of musical chairs here, like office musical chairs, where they're going round and round and round, and the person who wins is the one who passes the time clock right when the time switches over. This story comes to us from DeBlack123. Company has an asinine travel policy, cost them extra. A few months ago, I had to travel for work. Some cost-saving measures had been implemented recently, and I was required to have a funding letter from the financial department so they could allocate funds appropriately, even though my travel was authorized by my supervisor and required for the company business. Okay, I'll jump through this hoop, whatever. I get a funding letter and travel a couple hours to my home away from home. Halfway through my trip, my work schedule opens up. I have a few days off, but I know I'll be working more the following week. Since I'm only a few hours from home, I decide to check out of my hotel, drive home to spend the weekend with my family, then drive back the following week when I actually have work to do. Saves the company paying a few days for a hotel room and per diem. I get time with my family. Win-win, right? Wrong. When I submit my travel claim to financial, it counts as 2 separate trips. The problem is, I have one funding letter, which covers the dates of my travel, but doesn't cover 2 trips, even though both trips are inside the travel window in the funding letter. This blows up and takes about a month and a half to get sorted out, during which time I had to pay off my company credit card for the travel expenses incurred using my own funds. Eventually, the money was all properly allocated and I got reimbursed for my interest-free loan to the company, but I learned my lesson. Another trip comes up and I am issued one funding letter. I drive up again and work for a few days. Sure enough, my schedule opens up and I have some days off. This time, instead of checking out of my hotel, I just leave, drive home, and now I'm sitting on my couch typing this while the company pays my per diem and pays for an empty hotel room. Pretty sure the bean counters will get a raise for their fine work. Cheers to them. OP, another option you have for this one is to pack up your family and take them with you. Let them spend the week in that hotel room, enjoying room service and whatever else you can get away with charging back to the company. I mean, if they really want to spend the money for you to have a hotel room that whole time when you could be sleeping at home, you might as well be using the room with your family and enjoying your time together, right? This story comes to us from Studham, second-class consulting engineer. Years ago, I worked as a consulting engineer at this company with a very tightwad CEO with multiple sticks up his butt. Everyone else was super nice. I engineered a machine that shipped to the Far East and was asked to go on-site to start up the system. This was in the Northeast in February. I parked on an off-site parking lot to save my client the expense of parking at the airport and flew out on a cold, clear day and landed at my destination many hours later. I spent 2+ weeks working long hours to start up this machine. So many hours that I felt bad for my client and decided that I would not charge overtime. Fast forward to my departure, I asked for limo service home because the car was frozen solid and I'd flown some 20+ hours and was severely sleep deprived. Nope, only full-time employees get limo service. Consulting engineers have to drive themselves, decreed the CEO. I decided to charge full overtime to the letter for every hour over 8, especially the all-nighter I pulled while there. It was the most expensive $80 limo ride he never paid for. Okay, here's my advice to everybody out there, and whether you follow it or not is up to you, but you need to know your worth. You also need to know that you don't owe a company any of your time that isn't being compensated. So when OP said that they had so many hours they felt bad for the client and decided they would not charge overtime, what the heck are you doing? Dude, you're just a number to them anyway. You need to charge them that overtime every single time. You're worth it. Your time is worth it. It's the one thing we can never get back is more time. Just remember, if you don't value your time yourself, then your company never will. This story comes to us from Wenner Dogred. Important calculation due? Sorry, no work from home allowed. I am currently in my malicious compliance phase at work right now. I got ripped a new one last week because I needed to work from home in order to get some urgent stuff done for a conference I needed to attend the following week. I was explicitly told that I could not work from home without approval, and I was told that I signed a policy about it. I responded that my job requires me to work from home all the time, to which they replied, "You signed the policy." So now, after I leave the office, I turn off my work-issued cell phone and never look at it on the weekends. I am a salaried employee, but I'm not going to beg my employer to allow me to work from home. This weekend, I got a call on my personal cell from one of the other managers about approving some billing rates that were due. I told her that I wasn't allowed to work from home, and I will get to it on Monday whenever I have the opportunity. Everything will be late, but I signed the policy. It literally would have cost them nothing to just let me do my darn job. I already get paid a fixed rate, but if they want to play stupid games, they can win stupid prizes. OP added an edit and an update down below. Let's start with the edit. It says, so a number of comments asking about why I would even bother to work from home after hours. Here is my take. My employer is not paying me to sit in an office for 40 hours a week. They're paying me to do a relatively specialized job. Sometimes I do 30 hours a week, sometimes 40, sometimes more, whatever it takes to do the job. It has been extremely flexible for me in the past and has allowed me to balance family, work, and a few volunteer activities. This isn't really an anti-work thing, more of an anti-this particular person on a power trip. OP's update below the edit says, Monday came and went and not a peep from anyone about the rates getting out. Fixed a couple of bugs, but I think the other manager edited the PDF reports to get them out the door. Also, the deadline for it was pushed back a week, so everyone survived, but I have made some changes. Change number 1, I am no longer taking my work cell home with me. It is freeing and anxiety inducing at the same time after doing so for so long. Change number 2, I have informed any staff that may need to contact me that I won't be doing anything work related once I walk out of the office. Change number 3, I am updating my resume today. It's time to leave. Thanks to everyone for their feedback. Wish you all the best. What I got out of this one was that OP pushed back, decided not to work from home, and everything was still just fine at work. So OP had been putting in extra time for this company, working from home when they really didn't need to. OP, I'm glad you were able to make that change and completely unplug from work when you walk out the door of the workplace. It's a wonderful thing to walk away and just go, hey, I'm done. By the way, don't get a life in social media because you can never walk away. This story comes to us from the Omega010, seen and not heard. I work in contract security as an armed guard at a major utility company. I pick up extra work on my days off from my main site covering banks that the company I work for has clients in as well. Today, I covered a branch of a large bank that has a white and red logo like stagecoaches and traces their roots back to the mid-1800s. After I was allowed to enter the bank, the branch operations manager gave me a rundown and read me the riot act right off the bat. I had a feeling at that time that this might be a long day. 30 minutes later, a bank customer came in looking lost and said she had an appointment with a banker. I greeted her and told her to take a seat and they'll be with her shortly. That prompted Madam Branch Operation Manager to come out from the back and get on to me for telling the customer to take a seat. Told me that I wasn't allowed to give any direction to anyone coming in as it could cause problems. Okay, that's reasonable enough. An hour or so later, a man entered the branch with a problem and he was a bit irate because of his issue. Branch Operations Manager said she could try to help him and ran into issues, which caused him to get more irate, especially since she was not acting very helpful and kept putting the blame on him for something that appeared to be the bank's fault. She came out from behind the teller desk and was looking for a banker to help the gentleman, and while she was wandering around, I engaged him in conversation. He was wearing a Marine Corps hat and I started chatting with him about what he did in the Corps and other things along that line. She finally figured something out and instead of calling the gentleman over, she called my name and did a throat slash. After she was finished with the gentleman and wasn't able to help him while still blaming him for the situation, she called me over and proceeded to lay into me about how we had just spoke about talking to people. She said that I'm here for presence only, and I'm not here to de-escalate, one of my primary purposes of a security guard, or to speak with the clients. She said that my conversation with the man could cause problems for the bank, despite it not being about the bank at all, and that I wasn't to talk to the customers at all. I asked her if she wanted me to be seen and not heard, and she indicated that's what she wanted from me. She once again threatened to call my supervisor if I had a problem and didn't understand her. Message was received loud and clear. I notified my supervisor of the incident and then decided I was going to comply with her orders to the letter. Cue malicious compliance, with me deciding to communicate for the rest of the day with signs, from the limited sign language I knew from my wife and friends, and gestures. People would ask me questions and I'd just gesture and point to the please wait here sign. People would talk about the weather and I'd just nod. I directed people to stand in line with gestures and nods. This went on until just before noon when the branch manager pulled me into his office with Madam Branch Operations Manager. He proceeded to talk about their concerns and asked me what had happened with the irate gentleman. I filled him in and it was obvious by his reaction that my version of events didn't match with what Madam Branch Operations Manager had told him. Nevertheless, he proceeded to tell me how I was supposed to do things and that we had to work together. According to the both of them, anything that I say, even not related to the bank or financial matters, can cause problems, and it's best to not say anything, especially to irate customers. Afterwards, as I was leaving his office, I informed him that I'd already let my supervisor know of the situation, and that any further issues would be best brought to his attention. I'm half expecting them to call my supervisor to have me removed early, and that will be perfectly fine with me as I never plan to cover this location in the future. I am eating lunch now, but I plan on continuing my malicious compliance after my break ends. I'll be present and do my rounds as I'm supposed to do, but nothing says that I have to greet people or discuss anything with anyone. End of day update. When speaking to my ops manager at the end of the day, he informed me that they requested that I not return to the branch because of how I responded to their request to not speak to the customers. Told him that was fine as I was going to request not to go back to that branch anyway, and asked him if I was getting wrote up. He said that I was in the clear as it was obvious that I was following the client's instructions to the letter. I know it's probably not a very satisfying conclusion based on a lot of the stories here, but it's a good conclusion in the contract security world when following the client's instruction literally and engaging in malicious compliance. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Judicial Starfish. It says, "You're not allowed to de-escalate situations? Good lord. Glad your supervisor has your back. I cannot facepalm enough about that." OP responded and said, "I'm amazed that she said that, and then the branch manager backed her up on that. It really cuts me off at the knees in terms of doing my job." Alright everyone, what would you do in this case? Would you just stand there and become a statue and just completely blank the customers and staff altogether like they don't even exist? I don't know. Or would you say to them, sorry, I've been instructed by branch management that I'm not allowed to interact with customers, and then stop talking? Let me know what you would do in the comments down below on YouTube or on Spotify. Personally, I feel like this turns into a dangerous situation when the security guard isn't allowed to talk, and that security guard has training in de-escalation. So if somebody comes in really angry, pissed off, and maybe going to hurt somebody, you're not allowed to say anything to them. This is a load of BS. This story comes to us from Hurry Acceptable 9242. Mow your lawn wet? Okay, enjoy the look when it dries. I had a pretty successful lawn mowing hustle in high school, with enough regulars to have a decent income. Sometimes it just rains every inconvenient day, and lawns get longer and longer. Most customers understood that they needed to be patient and wait until it's dry enough to mow, but not this one guy. He was on the cutting edge of impatience, and in a moment of dullness, he insisted I come and deal with this because it was too long, even though it had continued to rain even on the same day. I told him this is not going to go well, but he insisted. So I got out there and did the best I could, with wet, soggy grass clumping up all over the place. If you know anything about this, you know that mowing thick, wet grass with a push mower tends to just lay the grass over and not really cut it. So you can imagine what it looked like after 2 dry days. The house was on a busy corner of the neighborhood, so until I could get to it a week later, it looked like a troop of drunken monkeys had attacked his lawn with scissors. It looked much worse than if he'd just waited until it was dry. The only thing I felt bad about was that everyone knew this was my work, so I made sure to make it look super nice as soon as I could do it properly. Okay, let's take a quick look at this one. OP bent over backwards to do what this guy wanted and get his lawn done, while also tarnishing their own reputation and leaving a really junky looking lawn behind. Yeah, I would have put my foot down and said, nope, that's just not going to happen today. So I think we're just going to have to turf this one, because to me, it's not really malicious compliance if OP is screwing themselves over. This story comes to us from Area Miserable 9187. Want me to question things? Watch me question everything. So I work with the most frustrating woman I have ever encountered. We're both managers within the company, but she continuously treats me like she's my boss and keeps track of what my team does, often commenting on things that have nothing to do with her. She tries to tell me how to feedback to my team, telling me how to pull them up on errors she perceives. She told me I cannot speak to clients one-on-one, despite the clients wanting to speak to me. She recently told me I'm not a writer when I queried a part of the project, but I am a writer. That's how I got the job. However, our teams collaborate all day, so I can't just ignore her. Recently, there was an issue where a note for a specific project was missed. It was missed by her team, and when it got to my team, we assumed that because it was approved by her team, we were good to go. Apparently, that was completely my fault, and I should know better. No accountability for the fact her team approved it and didn't flag it. She told me I had to flag such things in the future. Okay, I'll flag every single thing. Every single note that comes across with a project, I am questioning. Everything she's asking me to do, I am questioning. I must waste so much of my own time sending back random questions, but if it's winding her up, I will continue it until the end of time. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Flushlod. Yeah. It says, that's effed up and must be very frustrating. Do you have managers you report to? Do they know she tries to micromanage you? I'd ask your higher-ups if there had been a change in the chain of command, and if she is your supervisor, entitled to give instructions to you. OP responded to this one and said, oh, wait till you hear this. I once made a comment to her, all due respect, when I was at my wit's end. She told my manager. He rang me and had such a massive go at me, I sobbed in the office. So OP, what you're saying here is that your boss is encouraging and rewarding her behavior. I don't think that's a workplace that you want to be in anymore. And I hope that you would be looking for something else right away when you realize that nobody there is going to support you. They're only going to support the upper management. This story comes to us from Work From Home Hun, leaning into the no questions policy. I work at a retail store where each sale requires, on average, 10 minutes of paperwork. That's if you're fast and know what you're doing. 2 months into the job, the boss told us new hires to stop asking questions in front of the customers. We look like clowns and customers lose confidence. The only training they provided was asking questions. They'd stick you with the customer and make you guess how to process the paperwork. If you got stuck, you'd ask for help. They'd tell you what to click, but not why. Then they'd info dump all exceptions to the rule they just gave you. Malicious compliance. I stop asking questions and I take my sweet ass time, 30 to 40 minutes, guessing my way through paperwork. I've undercharged customers. A customer actually walked out. Call me when you actually have time for me because I can't be here all day. A customer decided not to buy. The senior employee was mad I didn't ask about shipping. Yes, we usually don't, but we sometimes make exceptions. Always ask questions. When I'm at the sales desk, instead of asking if we sell a product or accept an insurance, I just tell the callers we don't. This saves me from doing the work of looking them up. When I'm working the reception desk, I waste time looking up obscure insurance policies instead of just asking a senior employee. I'm not Latino, but I speak some Spanish. Now, when Spanish speakers call, I only respond in English. Before, I would speak Spanish and ask for help if I needed it. Now, because of the no questions policy, I don't even ask my coworkers if they are free to take a call. I feel bad for these people though, but not too bad. All they have to do is call back and hope I don't answer. Laugh out loud. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Angry Squid Is Okay. It says, tell you what, as a customer, I have no problems if the person helping me needs to ask another employee something. Better than the clown show that has resulted in the OP. Alright, I know OP's getting back at the management in this one, but I can't help but feeling like the people who are really losing out in this situation are the actual customers because they're not getting what they want in OP's store. This story comes to us from Brooks Sophia. Be available during lunch? Sure thing. My manager sent a passive-aggressive message to the whole team, clearly aimed at me. Lunch breaks are unpaid, but everyone is expected to be available during core hours, including lunch. I used to take a quick walk or step out to grab coffee. Never missed meetings, never late, but fine. If she wants me available, I'll play along. I started eating lunch at my desk every day. No headphones, not working, just sitting. I ignored emails and messages, and when people came over, I'd smile and say, I'm on my unpaid break, but I'll jump on it at 1. One day, she sent a message at 12:10 asking for a report ASAP. I didn't reply until 1. Someone else had scrambled to do it by then. She later asked why I didn't respond, and I said, I was available, just not working, as instructed. She never brought up lunch breaks again. I've said this a bunch of times in episodes recently. If I'm not being paid to be available, then I'm not available. Way too many people give extra time to companies without getting compensated for it. The one thing we can never get back in our lives is our time. So, if you're giving it to somebody else, make sure you're getting something back in return. This story comes to us from Eagle0829. Boss said dress more professional, and now I move boxes in a long shirt. My boss, Gary, fake though he looks like one, pulled me aside last week and says I need to dress better in order to look more professional. Not even kidding, I literally work in a warehouse. We literally move boxes and operate forklifts. Like, I was wearing clean jeans and a t-shirt, which seemed perfectly reasonable for, manual labor. But he wanted that, so I gave him professional, where I showed up Monday in a long shirt, dress shoes, wristwatch, the whole package. Looked like I was about to give a TED talk on supply chain management. And when he saw me, he told me this is a bit too much. Been doing this for 3 days now, like my coworkers think it's hilarious, and I'm getting genuine compliments from customers who think I'm upper management. Gary can't say crap because I'm technically following his orders, and I'm the most professionally dressed box mover in the area, and honestly, kinda feeling myself. Another way OP could have handled this one would have been to look at Gary and say, hey, Gary, could you just get us a uniform or something? Because I'm not gonna ruin my good clothes in this warehouse for your company image. I do find this one funny though, because people are always told to dress for the job they want and not the job that they have. But is it normal to dress for the job that your boss wants? This story comes to us from Cynical Mage. Don't touch the DeWalt. Going back through the mists of time to the days of working with my father-in-law as a builder's laborer for this little story. To start this, my father-in-law boss had a habit of going to B&Q for insert random non-critical item, when in actual fact, it was a handy excuse to go to a cafe for a sausage and bacon sarnie while the rest of us got on with the work. He had one golden rule. All other tools were whatever, but his precious DeWalt drill was his baby. Never, ever, ever touched the DeWalt. This fine morning, he decided to toddle off, leaving me, the plumber, and the plasterer to our various jobs. My task was to sort out the architrave and hang a door. After getting the hang of the builder's banter while being a girl, give as good as you get, and you're sorted, laughing my butt off, I thought I'd sort out the cheeky bugger. You see, don't touch the DeWalt, the only drill in the building. Fine, suits me. Father-in-law waltzes in, suspicious stains on his shirt, and what looked to be ketchup on the corner of his mouth. Why the heck isn't the door done? Well, I did what I could, but you said I wasn't to use the DeWalt. He sputtered a fair bit, the plasterer fell off the steps from pissing himself laughing, plumber quietly giggled, and I stood there pulling the most angelic face I could manage. And then I was finally given permission to use the darn drill. Alright, so the boss going out and getting some food while they're picking up things that are actually needed for the job site doesn't sound like that bad of a thing to me. I am, however, the kind of boss who would pick up stuff for the whole site every once in a while just to make sure they're happy, and that might encourage them to give me a bit more leeway in the future when I run out and take a little bit longer because I'm grabbing food. Our last story today comes to us from Swandamarm. Don't be on your phone while on the clock. This happened a while ago, but it's my favorite and most genius malicious compliance I've committed. I was working for a site work excavation company as a laborer on a pipe crew. I'm not a phone at work kind of guy. I don't like texting all day while at work, and I'm not that involved in social media. So all I would use it for was to pull it out of my pocket to really quick check the time. Foreman I was working with said I can't be on my phone while on the clock. I told him I'm not on my phone, I'm just looking at the time. He responded that if I wanted to look at the time, to get a watch. Okay. I went to like 5 pawn shops until I saw a relatively cheap pocket watch and I bought the crap out of it. Next workday, I overly exaggerated my efforts to look at the time, making it look like I was trying to hide phone use. Of course, my foreman jumped right down my throat. I told you no phone, even to check the time. It's not my phone, it's my new pocket watch, I said with a crap-eating grin. He seethed as he walked away, never bothered me about anything else, and I went back to my usual cruise shortly after, and it was no longer an issue. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Beard Farkland. It says, "This reminds me of the guy who decorated cookies to look like iPhones. He was holding one in his car and got pulled over by a cop. He rolls down the window and takes a bite. Then they realize he's got a warrant for unpaid parking tickets and take him in, laughing my effing butt off." Well, OP, you've done yourself a bit of a disservice here because I think the boss now has you clocked as a malingerer, and you're probably now on his watch list. I hope you've learned not to give bosses like that the time of day, because people like that will just continue to tick you off. Okay, we'll end it there. If you love puns and my comments on these stories, make sure to give us a follow on your favorite podcasting platform, Or if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really does help us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.